Hey guys, tonight we slip into your lumpy straw mattress nestled beside a wooden wall that's cold enough to freeze your breath. No, that's not a dream, it's the Middle Ages. You can almost feel the scratchy wool blanket pulled over your head, smell the smoky rushlight guttering near the door, and hear the echo of a distant church bell marking another freezing dawn. You probably won't survive this, but at least you'll learn a few things before the rats nibble your boots. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the sun even thinks about rising to the clang of a bell from a church you can't see but feel in your bones. No alarms, no snooze button, just a relentless toll that's been rung at roughly the same time every day by a sleepy monk who probably hates it more than you do. Morning in the Middle Ages isn't gentle. The air is sharp, the kind of cold that makes your nostrils stick together, and the first thing that greets you isn't your cat. It's a scurrying mouse under the bed. Your bed is a frame stuffed with straw or heather covered in a sackcloth, ticking that you haven't washed since, well, ever. You reach to scratch your scalp and find surprise lice. They're part of the family now. Everyone has them, and bedbugs too. They live deep in the wooden joints, marching out in the night to snack on your arms and ankles. Sweet dreams indeed. Clothing doubles as pajamas. You're wearing most of what you own, a linen shirt, rough wool tunic hose, and if you're lucky, a cloak. No central heating means you sleep fully dressed. Your breath floats visibly in the room. The walls sweat with condensation, and the single shuttered window lets in more wind than light. You're not even entirely sure if it's morning or just the rooster acting ambitious again. You sit up, careful not to step in the chamber pot under the bed. That's right, no running water here. You share that sloshy little vessel with your spouse, your kids, and probably the family goat who lives inside for warmth during winter. It smells exactly how you'd imagine a warm, stale pot of collective midnight emergencies would. Sometimes it's your job to empty it into the open sewer trench that runs down the middle of your street, which is affectionately referred to as the stinking ditch. Charming. Your floor is dirt, maybe covered with rushes, dried plants spread across the ground to soak up things. You sweep them out occasionally and lay new ones, but that doesn't stop the mites, maggots, or the occasional squashed toad. Yes, a toad. You don't question how it got there. Now for breakfast, if you're a peasant, you head outside into that pre-dawn chill. Your breath fogs the air as you trudge toward the hearth to warm stale bread if there's any left. You've kept it wrapped in cloth to keep the rats away, but they're determined little creatures with surprisingly sharp teeth. The bread is dense, dark, and probably gritty. Some say the millstones dropped bits of stone into the flour. Others whisper that bakers added ground-up bark or ash to stretch the dough. Either way, you chew slowly and try not to crack a molar. If you're rich, breakfast might involve yesterday's cold meat or pottage reheated over a smoky fire. But don't think that means less filth. Your velvet pillow still has lice, and your feather bed may have fleas. Even in castles, cleanliness is aspirational at best. You gulp something warm, small beer maybe, or ale. Yes, even the kids. Because the well water, it's more likely to cause dysentery than quench thirst. The fermentation process in beer kills off most waterborne horrors, so it's actually safer than water. Ironically, you stay sober longer drinking beer than drinking fresh spring water. Historians still argue whether water sources in all regions were uniformly toxic, or if urban density just concentrated the filth. A rooster crows again, a little too late to be helpful. Outside, the street begins to fill with sounds, the clang of blacksmiths, barking dogs, shouting vendors. But right now, you focus on basic survival, warming up, chewing food without breaking teeth, and keeping your toes inside the single pair of boots you own. You scratch your scalp again and mutter about the lice. There's no shampoo, of course. You might have a comb, but even that's a luxury. Most people keep their hair covered to hide the mess and trap the warmth. And yes, your head probably itches from the wool hat, not just the bugs. A neighbor greets you with a nod and a half smile that says, "We're both in this together." And in that moment, you find a weird kind of camaraderie in shared discomfort. Medieval life isn't about thriving. It's about surviving long enough to hear tomorrow's bell. You glance toward the church tower as another bell peals. That's prime time now, time to work, pray, or start walking the 5 miles to the nearest market town. You grab your tools, maybe a hoe, a bucket, a basket, and step over the waste channel as you begin your day, one clump of muddy earth at a time. Meanwhile, back inside, the fire sputters low. You stoke it with a few twigs and a prayer, knowing full well it may not last the hour. There's no chimney, so smoke curls up and hangs in the rafters. Your eyes sting, but you've grown used to it. Every surface is coated with soot. Every surface also is alive. Beetles in the beams, ants under the rushes, spiders in the corners, and something that might be a bat sleeping upside down above the door. You leave it alone. It eats flies. That makes it your friend. And don't forget the noises, someone coughing deeply in the next house, a baby wailing, a sheep bleeding under the floorboards. Privacy is an illusion. You hear everything, they hear everything, and there's no insulation to keep secrets. Despite it all, there's a rhythm to this life. It's not comfortable, but it's consistent. The bell rings, you rise. You scratch, you eat. You trudge. And somewhere in the itch and the ash and the bread, with a hint of gravel, you settle into the medieval morning, a daily grind so gritty it would make your phone battery die out of sympathy. You're still chewing the last bite of that gritty bread as you step into the daylight or something like it. The sky's a gray smear and the street smells like boiled onions, horse dung, and last week's fish. You breathe through your mouth and carry on. It's time to get to work, but your stomach's still rumbling. Good thing you know where the next meal's coming from: bread. Again. Maybe soup. Maybe something that looks like soup, but is mostly just hot water and prayer. Bread is the backbone of your diet. Rich or poor, male or female, everyone eats it. The only difference is what's in it and what it's been through. If you're poor, your bread is coarse, dark, and made from rye, barley, or oats. It's dense enough to bruise your shin if you drop it. If you're rich, it might be made of fine white wheat flour, soft and freshly baked. But even then, fine is relative. Because here's the thing, flour is expensive. Wheat flour even more so. So people get creative. Bakers stretch their dough with additives. Some harmless like beans or peas. Others, less so. You might find sawdust, ground chalk, or clay. Not by accident, on purpose. Anything to bulk it up and make it cheaper. And if the flour's gone a bit sour or the grain had got mold on it, bake it anyway. The heat will kill the worst of it, right? Historians still argue whether bread adulteration was the norm or an occasional scandal. But records from city guilds show that bakers were fined often for messing with the dough. Sometimes the penalty was a fine. Other times they'd be dunked in a public pillory while holding a fake loaf. Or worse, banned from baking entirely. But back to your bread. It's probably been sitting out for a few days, since ovens are expensive to run, and baking is done in batches. If it's soft, that's suspicious. If it's hard, at least it's honest. Some folks use bread not just to eat, but as plates. That's right, The famous trencher is a thick, stale slice of bread that acts as your dish. After a meal, the trencher might be eaten fed to dogs or given to the poor. Recycling medieval style. You bite down and crunch. Was that a seed or gravel? You're not sure. You chew cautiously, half expecting a tooth to surrender. Dental care, after all, isn't really a thing. If something breaks you, either live with it or get it yanked out with pliers after a few swigs of ale. With breakfast finished, it's off to work or chores. But food's never far from your mind. If you're near a market, you can smell it from 2 streets away: smoked fish, fresh bread, onions, garlic, old cheese. Some things smell great. Some make you reconsider breathing. Vendors shout, babies cry, a goat escapes and knocks over a table of pies. Welcome to grocery shopping medieval edition. You glance at the breads on sale. Some look golden, others are suspiciously gray. You're tempted to ask what's in them, but you don't want to look picky. Bread is bread. Hunger wins. Behind the bread stand a woman is setting up a table with trenchers, each loaded with thick stew. You recognize the look of them: last week's vegetables boiled again and again, thickened with barley or stale beer. Pottage. It's practically a food group. But let's say you've got some bread left at home and you're planning to toast it. There's no toaster, of course. No sliced loaves. You'll stick the wedge on a long fork or lay it near the edge of the hearth until it's warm and singed. Not fancy, but it makes the chew a little easier. If you're really lucky, maybe you'll have a dab of lard or honey to smear on top. Butter. That depends on your region and the season. Butter melts fast and turns rancid faster. Unless it's salted, it won't last long. Some folks avoid it entirely and use goose fat instead. Others treat it like gold. Your spread of choice depends on geography class and what you can trade. Let's take a short, chewy detour to monasteries. Monks make their own bread, often as part of their labor. They rise early, pray again, then break their fast with bread dipped in wine or ale. Their loaves are sometimes better than anything in town. But they don't eat to indulge. Food is fuel, and gluttony is a sin. Still, monks aren't saints in the kitchen. There are records of monks hoarding white bread for themselves and serving coarse loaves to guests and the poor. Some orders were caught skimming the best grain for themselves. Human nature doesn't change just because you wear a robe and chant Latin. Speaking of sins, there's a running joke in your village about that one baker who always bakes 12 loaves when someone asks for a dozen. Not generosity, fear. It's called a baker's dozen, and it's insurance against being accused of shorting the customer. Because being accused of cheating could land you in stocks, or worse, lose your guild membership. You grab another chunk of bread from your satchel. It's wrapped in a cloth, still dusty from the mill. You notice it's harder than this morning. The crusts turned sharp. You could use it as a weapon. It's fine. You dip it into your cup of weak ale and chew slowly. Every meal is a math problem. How much bread do I need to stretch until next market day? Will the cheese last? Is there salt to preserve the fish? Bread is the constant in this equation. Everything else changes. You might have fruit if it's summer, a salted herring if it's Lent, or nothing at all if the harvest was poor. If you're a noble, bread becomes symbolic. You eat manchet bread, fine, white, and fluffy compared to peasant loaves. It's sifted multiple times. Flour this refined is like silk compared to burlap. It shows you have wealth access and bakers who won't dilute the dough with sawdust, but it's not immune to weirdness. Even noble households had their mishaps, like the infamous bread poisoning events historians still debate. Some claim that moldy rye led to outbreaks of convulsions and hallucinations, possibly linked to ergot fungus. Whole villages would twitch, scream, and fall into trances. Ergotism. Was it witchcraft? Was it poison? Historians still argue whether it was caused by bread or something darker in the rye. You finish your bread, slowly scraping your crust along the edge of a shared pot to collect the last dribble of stew. It's not glamorous, but it's familiar. And in a world full of smoke, mud, and uncertainty, bread is the one thing you can count on. Even if it breaks your teeth. You've had your bread dense, dusty, and maybe slightly toxic, and now nature calls. Again. You hold it for a moment. You're outside walking past neighbors, and toilets aren't really a thing here. Your options limited, undignified, and disturbingly public. Welcome to the medieval bathroom experience, where the only guarantee is that you will never look at a bucket the same way again. If you live in a small town or village, there's no plumbing, no outhouse at the end of the garden, and definitely no toilet paper. You're probably relying on the family chamber pot, a ceramic or wooden bowl stored under the bed, under the stairs, or even just outside the door. Everyone uses it, everyone. Children, adults, grandparents, and yes, sometimes the dog knocks it over. You carry it out when it gets full, which is often, and empty it into the nearest waste trench. Streets have open gutters called kennels or ginnels where waste runs freely, or rather slowly. Very slowly, especially in summer. You toss your offering with a practiced flick and a polite shout, "Gardez-vous," if you're French-speaking, or something cruder if you're not. If you don't warn passers-by, well, hope they were wearing boots. Now, if you're in a more civilized town like London or Paris, you might have access to communal latrines, especially in inns or near marketplaces. These are basically wooden seats over pits, sometimes shared by dozens of people. The smell is eye-watering. Flies hum in thick clouds. You hold your breath and try to be quick. If you're rich, you might have a garderobe, an early form of indoor latrine. It's a small room jutting off the side of your stone home or castle, suspended over a shaft that empties into the moat or a cesspit. Sounds fancy, but don't get excited. There's no seat, just a hole in a wooden plank. And no, it's not private. Castles echo loudly. You finish your business while hoping the chambermaid isn't walking below. Now what about wiping your thinking leaves right? Maybe cloth, try moss. Or hay. Or even your hand and a splash of water if you're lucky. Rich folks might use linen scraps or, brace yourself, swan feathers. For the poor, it's whatever's nearby. Birch bark, seaweed, snow in winter. Inventive, if not gentle. Toilet paper won't arrive in Europe for centuries. You suffer in silence, scratch later, and try not to think about it. Public hygiene almost non-existent. Waste flows, openly pigs roam the streets, and dogs pick through the muck. And yet you get used to it. You have to. The smell becomes background noise like the bells or the gossip. But cities are trying in their own clumsy way. Some medieval towns employ men called gong farmers. Their job to clean out cesspits and privies, usually at night, when the stench is less overpowering. It's one of the worst jobs in history, but surprisingly well paid. Because no one else wants to do it. And really, can you blame them? You might see a gong farmer hauling barrels of waste through narrow alleys, his face covered with a cloth soaked in vinegar to mask the smell. He's not exactly beloved, but he's essential. Without him, the entire block could drown in its own filth. Monasteries handle things differently. They often have running water from diverted streams and channels. Some even have stone-built latrines with proper drainage. Monks file in robes, rustling heads bowed. But don't picture luxury. These were still cold, drafty, and shared spaces, just slightly more advanced than your typical town pit. Meanwhile, if you're a traveler on the road, things get tricky. You're in the woods behind a tree, hoping no one stumbles upon you mid-squat. Privacy is a luxury. Hygiene is a prayer. And if you're sick, oh boy. Diarrhea is not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Dehydration kills fast. But treatment often involves more wine, some herbal poultices, or bloodletting, none of which help the core problem. You lie there miserable, probably in the same bed you share with others, and just hope to survive. Let's talk about chamber pots again, because yes, they return to your life all day. In winter, it might freeze. In summer, it might ferment. If you're too weak to carry it out, it just stays there. Some people add straw or ashes to absorb the smell. Others don't. The pot is both necessary and loathed. There's also the problem of night. No one wants to wander through a pitch-dark village at 3 a.m. barefoot with a candle just to find the privy. So you go where you are, the pot, a bucket, maybe a corner. The floor rushes, soak it up. Sort of, until they don't. Historians still argue whether the filth of medieval towns was exaggerated by later writers who wanted to paint the era as backward. Some archaeological evidence suggests not every street was knee-deep in dung, but the smell, that's pretty well confirmed. Travelers from other cultures often commented politely or not on the unmistakable odor of a medieval European town. But don't get too smug, people in the Middle Ages had a different relationship with waste. It wasn't hidden or flushed away. It was part of life. Seen, smelled, and tolerated. Some even believed that strong smells had health benefits like fending off the plague. People wore scented pomanders, sniffed herbs, and covered their faces with cloth when walking past cesspits. Not always because of modesty, but because they thought foul air could literally make you sick. Ironically, they were partly right, just for the wrong reasons. The miasma theory of disease said bad smells caused illness. Germs hadn't been discovered yet, but they knew something nasty lurked in the air. So they lit incense, sprinkled vinegar, or burned herbs in the streets. You, on the other hand, just hold your breath and walk faster. You return home, stepping over yet another pile of something unspeakable in the alley, and lift the wooden lid on your chamber pot to add your own daily contribution. Then you set it back down under the bed with the resigned grace of someone who knows this will never improve. And as you sit back down to work, your looms stir your pot of onions or stitch your torn hose, you catch the faint scent of, well, everything. You scratch your leg absent-mindedly and whisper to yourself, could be worse. And somehow it always is. You're starting to get used to the smell, mostly because everything smells. The house, the street, your neighbors, yourself. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders and step into your boots, which are stiff with yesterday's mud. Today's goal, stay warm, stay dry, and if you can help it, don't itch too much, because you're not alone under that heavy wool cloak. Oh no. You've got company. Tiny, hungry company. Fleas, lice, and mites are part of your wardrobe. They live in your seams, burrow into the folds of your hood, and crawl gleefully through your underlayers. And yes, you've been scratching in your sleep again. Your arms bear the telltale red dots of flea feasting. You'd think fleas are a poor man's problem. But no, everyone gets them. Rich, poor, knight, or baker. The only difference, the wealthy wear more layers, so the fleas have more places to hide. They love fur, especially rabbit and marten, that fancy fur-trimmed cloak you saved a year's wages for. It's a 5-star inn for parasites. Hope you enjoy the company. Fashion in the Middle Ages is less about style and more about status. What you wear says everything about who you are, where you stand in society. And let's be honest, how badly you're willing to itch. Men wear tunics and hose. Women wear layered gowns. Everyone wears wool. Linen is used for underclothes if you're lucky. But that fine white linen rare. And once it's stained well, There's no bleach, and lye soap only goes so far. Buttons are mostly decorative. You rely on laces and belts. Zippers won't show up for centuries, and you wouldn't trust them even if they did. Your cloak fastens with a brooch if you're fancy, or just a knot over your chest. And shoes. Let's just say they're more about surviving the road than expressing your personality. If your soles are made from leather, you're living large. Here's the kicker: you don't wash your clothes often. Maybe once a month. Maybe. Washing means soaking in lye soap, scrubbing on a wooden board, then drying everything near the hearth, where it'll just collect smoke and more bugs. So instead, you wear it, and wear it, until it practically walks off on its own. Now, if you're noble or a wealthy merchant, you've got fashion options. Bright colors, fur lining, long sleeves, fancy embroidery. Purple's reserved for royalty. Gold thread if you can afford it. But wearing the wrong color or style can literally get you fined. Sumptuary laws forbid commoners from dressing above their station. So if you show up to church wearing a velvet cloak as a peasant, expect gossip, shame, or a fine from the town bailiff. And yet fashion finds a way. People still find room for flair. A carved belt buckle, a braid of ribbon in your hair, a brightly dyed hood. Clothing is identity, and you express yours with whatever scraps you can afford. But as much as it says about you, it also says something else: you're itchy. Because back to the fleas. They're relentless. You try to pick them off one by one, but they multiply like fleas. Some folks comb them out into a bowl of water. Others crush them between their thumbnails. There's even a medieval gadget, a little flea trap made of wood and fur worn around the neck like a cursed necklace. Historians still argue whether these actually worked or were just fashionably useless. And then there are lice. You don't want to talk about the lice. They live in your hair, your eyebrows, your armpits. Shaving your head is one solution, and some folks do it, monks especially. But most just live with the crawl. There's vinegar rinses, herbal sachets, and the hope that maybe, just maybe this time, they'll go bother someone else. Weirdly enough, lice were so common, they became symbolic. Some medieval texts describe them as companions, as if they're loyal pets. That's one way to cope. And if you're wondering how people reacted to the constant scratching, oh, they noticed. But they didn't blame you. They blamed the cloak, or the fur, or the time of year. There's even a belief that fleas show up more in spring, like daffodils, a sign of the season. But let's say you're dressing up for a feast. You've pulled out your best tunic, patched neatly, and tied your sleeves with bright cords. You feel sharp. You feel ready. And then someone points. There's a flea on your forehead. It jumps to your neighbor's goblet. No one bats an eye. Meanwhile, the fancier you are, the heavier your outfit. Nobles sometimes wear sleeves so long they drag behind them. That's not practical, it's status. You've got servants to carry your train. They might also brush your cloak with aromatic herbs to hide the smell. Lavender, rosemary, sage, nature's cologne. And what's under the cloak? Let's talk underwear. Or the lack thereof. Men might wear braids, loose linen shorts, often tied with a cord. Women wear shifts. There's no elastic, no spandex, no comfort. You tie it cinch, it hope it holds. Laundry day is a rare and holy thing. The rich might scent their clothes with oils or perfumes. Musk is popular, as is rosewater. But some of these perfumes smell intense. More like fermented fruit than fresh flowers. You hope the stink of sweat and animals drowns it out. One quirky trend, wearing animal pelts fur side in. Supposedly warmer. But it also makes your clothes squirm with bugs you can't see. Especially if it's badger or squirrel. Yes, squirrel capes. Fashion is suffering. And let's not forget the hat. Everyone wears one. Men wear coifs, caps, or hoods with long lyra pipes, the pointy tails that swing like tiny flags. Women cover their hair with wimples, veils, or elaborate linen structures held in place by pins and patience. No one shows their hair in public unless they're poor loose or under 5 years old. So now you're bundled up, cloaked in wool, crawling with invisible companions, and heading out to impress. You strut past your neighbor's dung heap with as much elegance as you can muster, scratching discreetly behind one ear. Another day, another louse. You're starting to think that you might be the only one in the village who actually misses water. Clean, fresh water. But here in the Middle Ages, water is less a source of life and more a public health gamble. So what do you drink instead? Ale, beer, weak wine, even soup made from ale. Anything but water. Because if it's clear and comes from a stream, it might also come with a side of dysentery. Let's rewind. You're thirsty. It's a long day in the field or in the market, and you reach for a cup. But you don't grab water. You never do. Water is for desperate people. The well might be contaminated. The local stream probably downstream from someone else's latrine. That gentle babble is really just the sound of your immune system losing. Instead, you drink small beer, a very low alcohol brew that's safer than water cheap and consumed from dawn to dusk. Even children drink it. Some people never taste plain water their entire lives. You might think they must have been tipsy all the time, but not quite. Small beer is barely fermented, enough to kill bacteria. Not enough to get you dancing on tables unless you drink several gallons. If you're wealthier, you might have wine, especially in Southern Europe. But even then, it's usually watered down. No one drinks it straight. Too strong, too expensive, and besides diluting it is the polite thing to do. You might add herbs, spices, even honey. If it's gone a little sour, no problem. Just call it vintage. For the lower classes, ale is the go-to. Brewed fresh, it's slightly cloudy, earthy, and varies wildly from house to house. You might brew your own at home if you're lucky enough to afford malted grain. Otherwise, you buy it from the alewife, the neighborhood brewer, usually a woman stirring her bubbling vat and scolding kids with a ladle. Some of these women become local celebrities known for their secret recipes or the strength of their brew. Others cut corners, water down the ale, or reuse grain multiple times. There are rules against that, but let's be honest, who's checking? Historians still argue whether the average person consumed more alcohol than we do today. Sure, people drank more often, but it was weaker. Most folks weren't drunk, they were just trying to survive. Now, if you're someone who insists on water, maybe because the ale gives you headaches, or because you're fasting, you're taking a risk. Some towns try to clean their water, diverting fresh streams into carved wooden conduits or stone channels. But they often pass too close to tanneries, butcher shops, and all the delightful places that dump waste directly into them. You sip cautiously, knowing that today's water could be tomorrow's stomach cramps, or worse. The words fever flux and bloody humors start echoing ominously. So what do people do instead? They boil things. Broths, stews, and teas, though tea as we know it isn't here yet. Instead, you might drink an herbal infusion, mint sage or elderflower steeped in hot water and passed off as medicine or comfort. Some of them actually work. Others taste like you licked a garden shovel. Let's say it's a feast day. You're in a hall surrounded by noise, song, and roast meat, the drink of choice ale, or for the rich mulled wine with cinnamon and cloves, imported luxuries that prove just how well-connected your host is. People raise their mugs and drink heartily. You join them not because you're thirsty, but because not drinking might make you look suspicious, or worse, ungrateful. And yes, there's drunkenness. People overdo it. The local bailiff knows who stumbles home too often. The church preaches against gluttony and excess, but that doesn't stop the ale from flowing. Penance is easier to swallow than sobriety, but moderation exists too. Farmers sip slowly through long days. Merchants pace themselves while negotiating. Even monks keep it steady with regulated portions during meals. And that's saying something, considering some monasteries had their own breweries. One French abbey in the 14th century was known to ration out a gallon of ale per monk per day. That's not excess, it's hydration. Let's pause to admire how much ingenuity goes into making not water safe. Brewing, boiling, fermenting, all alchemical rituals of daily survival. You're not chasing flavor. You're dodging death. Back in your cottage, the alewife is brewing. The smell of malt and wet grain hangs in the air. She pours you a clay mug of the fresh batch, slightly warm and still foaming. You nod politely. It's tangy, thick, and slightly sour, but it's drinkable. You don't think about what's in it. You just drink. Water might be natural, but in the Middle Ages, natural means probably full of worms. You choose the mug with bubbles over the bucket with floating moss. And don't even ask about ice. Your stomach's full of ale and gritty bread, and already the bells are ringing again. No, it's not time for lunch, it's time to pray. Again. Because in the Middle Ages, your day is sliced neatly into chunks by the tolling of bells, each one demanding your attention, your posture, and your soul. This isn't optional. Religion isn't just part of your life, it is your life. Every hour, every activity, every chore is accompanied by the steady rhythm of devotion. You kneel, stand, bow, cross yourself, and hope you're doing it right. Because if you mess it up, someone will notice. And if you mess it up publicly, someone will fine you. Or worse, whisper about you at the alehouse. You might start your day with matins in the pitch-black pre-dawn, especially if you're a monk or particularly devout. Then there's Lauds Prime, Terce, Sext Nun Vespers, and Compline. 7 times a day, sometimes more. Your average medieval villager doesn't attend every one, thankfully, but even peasants are expected to pause their labor, mutter a few prayers, and at least pretend to care. You hear the bell and know that's terce. Around 9 a.m., time to stop mending that net or thatching that roof and send up a quick Ave Maria. Even if your hands are full of mud, and if you're in a monastic community, well, buckle up. Your life is a holy assembly line. You rise at midnight for vigils, chant psalms half asleep, then spend the rest of your day bouncing between prayer and labor. Historians still argue whether monastic schedules led to greater mental discipline or just spiritual burnout. Either way, your time is not your own. But even outside monasteries, religion has claws. You go to church every Sunday, no excuses. Sick, you better be dying. Hungover, confess it. Traveling, find a roadside shrine. Your parish priest knows your face, your sins, and your bad habit of dozing off during sermons. And speaking of sermons, they're not short. A sermon might last an hour or two if the priest is feeling fiery. You sit on hard wooden benches or stand in the back, clutching your hood against the drafty chill, nodding solemnly while wondering what's for dinner. The Latin rolls over your head like water off a duck. You don't understand most of it, but you know when to murmur, Amen. Church isn't just a building. It's the beating heart of your village. It's where you get baptized, married, and buried. It's where your children are taught the alphabet if they're lucky enough to learn at all. It's where you tithe your wages, confess your misdeeds, and beg for rain during droughts. You owe the church money, not optional. A tithe, 10% of your earnings or harvest, goes to the local clergy. And if you can't pay in coins, you pay in kind: eggs, grain, a goat. Failure to pay, expect public shaming or worse, divine warnings whispered by your more pious neighbors. Inside the church, You see images, painted saints, wooden crucifixes, bright stained glass if you're lucky. You probably can't read, but these pictures teach you everything you need to know. Heaven is glorious, hell is terrifying, and purgatory is complicated. Better light a candle just in case. You cross yourself again and glance at the priest. He's wearing fine robes, probably embroidered with gold. Meanwhile, your sleeves are patched for the third time, but you don't question it. The priest speaks for God, and besides, he knows Latin. That makes him nearly magical. For children, religion starts early. They learn the Pater Noster before they can plow a field. They mimic their parents, kneeling, genuflecting, crossing themselves at every cough and sneeze. Some even believe that spirits lurk in dark corners and shadows, so bedtime prayers aren't just comforting, they're protective. And then there's confession. You enter the box, or just kneel beside the priest if the church is small, and whisper your sins. You cheated at dice. You coveted your neighbor's ox. You had impure thoughts about the butcher's daughter. The priest listens, nods, and assigns penance. A few Hail Marys. Maybe a fast, maybe a donation. You nod relieved and exit with a heart 2% lighter. You believe in miracles. Of course you do. Everyone does. You've heard stories of saints healing the blind, curing fevers, even raising the dead. You carry a relic, a saint's tooth, or so the seller claimed. You wear a wooden cross. You touch holy water at the door and believe fully that it protects you. You also believe in demons. You've seen them in paintings, horned, twisted, burning. You think that illness comes from sin, bad air, or an angry spirit. So when the bell rings for another funeral, and they ring differently for men, women, and children, you bow your head and mutter a prayer just in case the dead is still listening. During Lent, you fast. No meat, no eggs, no dairy. 40 days of piety that leave you dreaming about roast goose and salted pork. You eat fish if you can find it, and if not eel, or brace yourself beaver, because the church once declared that beaver tail counted as fish. Scholars still debate whether this was ignorance or a brilliant loophole. Feast days are a different story. You go all out. Roast meat, dancing music, and laughter, all under the watchful eyes of saints painted on every wall. Religion isn't always somber. Sometimes it's celebratory. The church calendar is packed with saints' days, holy days, and local miracles. You never know when you'll be told to light a candle or bake a special loaf. Back home, your daily routine follows the bells like a heartbeat. You pause when they ring. You bow your head. Even if you're ankle-deep in manure, you whisper a prayer. Just to be safe. You don't question it. Religion is the air you breathe. Sacred, inescapable, and strangely comforting. Because no matter how bad things get, how itchy, hungry, cold, or scared, you know someone's keeping score. And maybe, just maybe, lighting enough candles will get you through another plague season. You've prayed, scratched, and sipped enough ale to keep your gut bacteria guessing, and now it's time to talk about food again. Not the kind that's safe or delicious. No, tonight we're looking at the strange, the suspicious, and the downright medieval approach to eating. Because while bread and ale keep you alive, the rest of the medieval menu ranges from genius improvisation to culinary roulette. Let's start with meat. If you're rich, meat is a staple, roasted, spiced, skewered, and presented with flair. You might enjoy boar's head with gilded tusks, venison stew, or a roasted swan dressed in its own feathers for the full drama. If that sounds fancy, remember it's all cooked over open fires, flavored with guesswork, and preserved by salting, drying, or sheer stubbornness. If your poor meat is an event, it happens when a pig dies or when a bit of leftover offal trickles down from the manor. Mostly you rely on pottage again, thick soup of grains, roots, and mystery greens. Occasionally, you'll flavor it with a bone or a scrap of bacon rind. Meat is precious. Bones are borrowed, used, boiled, then returned. Not even joking. And freshness. Not guaranteed. There's no refrigeration, remember. So salted herring, smoked eel, or pickled turnip might be on the menu. You sniff it, shrug, and chew. There's even a trick: if something smells a bit off, just boil it in ale with onions and spices. Problem solved. Sort of. Historians still argue whether medieval food was truly that bland, or if modern snobbery colors our view. Some spices were used, yes, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. But unless you're rich, they're rare. Imported, expensive, and worth more than gold. You might see a single clove floating in a stew like a royal guest. Let's talk about fasting. It's not just a religious act, it's a lifestyle. You fast dozens of days a year, not just Lent. No meat, no animal products. Fish is allowed, which explains why eel becomes a dietary hero. Eel pie, eel stew, eel jelly. You're beginning to see eels in your dreams. And then there are loopholes. The church says no meat, but someone somewhere argued that puffins counted as fish. Monks in Northern Europe happily agreed. Beaver tail, as we mentioned, makes the cut. Anything with a slippery tail seems to sneak through the loophole. If it swims, you can eat it. Even if it waddles on land and chews trees. But what about fruits and vegetables? Those are suspect. Too wet or cold in the humoral theory of medicine. Remember, every food in the Middle Ages was thought to affect your bodily balance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A juicy pear too moist. A raw apple may unbalance your phlegm. Cook it first, or risk doom. Salads rare. Raw veggies are seen as a health hazard. You boil your cabbage until it weeps. You roast your onions until they collapse. Texture isn't a goal, it's a casualty. Now cheese, on the other hand, is welcome. Hard cheese keeps well, especially if waxed or smoked. Soft cheese riskier. You might make it at home from curdled milk, adding herbs or wrapping it in leaves. You eat it sparingly, cautiously, and sometimes on bread if it's a special day. Milk depends on who you ask. Some say it's for children and the elderly. Others say it thickens the blood and clouds the mind. It spoils fast anyway, so you turn it into butter or cheese as quickly as possible. Or pour it into pottage and cross your fingers. Eggs are valuable too. Chickens don't lay year-round, so each egg feels like a gift. You boil it, bake it, or wrap it in dough and toss it into a stew. You don't waste it. Even eggshells might be used in remedies or compost. Nothing goes unused. And desserts, prepare to be underwhelmed. If your poor, dessert means berries in summer or honey on bread if you're blessed. If you're rich, you might enjoy a custard tart or fruit pie. But even then, sugar is wildly expensive. More often, you sweeten things with honey or dried fruit, like figs or dates. A spiced cake might be a lump of bread soaked in ale, mashed with raisins and sprinkled with cinnamon. You eat it with your fingers and call it festive. There's one particularly strange food you might encounter at a feast: the cockentrice. It's half pig, half chicken, stitched together, roasted, and served whole. A Frankenmeat masterpiece designed to wow guests and horrify children. Rich folks adore these culinary illusions: pastry castles, meat pies shaped like animals or live birds stuffed into hollowed-out loaves fluttering out when cut. It's not dinner, it's theater. But for most people, food is not about fun. It's survival. You grow what you can gather, what you find, and preserve what you must. Herbs like parsley, sage, and garlic flavor your meals, but also serve as medicine. You dry mushrooms, pickle turnips, and pray your grain stores don't mold. Spoilage is a real threat. You've seen weevils in your flour. You've fished a mouse from your pickle barrel. You've eaten a sausage that made your cousin sweat through his shoes. You still eat. Because hunger is worse. And food theft a crime. You steal a loaf, you get pilloried or worse. Some towns hang repeat offenders. You dream about roast goose but wake to stale rye. It's the reality of daily life, not starvation exactly, but a constant flirtation with it. Still, once in a while, there's a celebration. A wedding, a holy day, a good harvest. You gather, share food, dance, and laugh. You bite into a meat pie that's actually warm. You chew slowly, savoring every spiced crumb. For a moment, you forget about bugs and bell tolls and chamber pots. And for that moment, sweetened by honey and wood smoke, it almost feels like a feast. You've eaten your questionable meat pie, licked your fingers clean on your patched-up tunic, and now it's time to get to work. Real work. The kind that blisters your hands, knots your back, and fills your nostrils with equal parts sweat, hay, and pig breath. Because in the Middle Ages, labor isn't a lifestyle, it's survival. And if you don't pull your weight, you might not eat again until the next feast day. Let's say you're a peasant. That's the default for most people. You live in a village, tend a small patch of land, and owe rent or labor to your lord. Your title, villain. Sounds fancy, but it just means serf with obligations. You don't own the land you till. You're tied to it. Literally. You can't leave without permission. Your legs may be yours, but the soil under your feet belongs to someone else. You rise with the sun scratch that before the sun. The morning frost still bites at your boots as you grab your hoe, your sickle, or your wooden plowshare. You yawn, stretch, and step into mud. Again. Every day starts this way. Every day is this way. During the planting season, you dig rows in dense, stubborn earth. Your ox pulls the plow if you have one. Otherwise, it's just you and the neighbors taking turns hauling the share. You scatter seed by hand, bent at the waist, walking in crooked lines that someone once called straight. Then you pray. Because if it doesn't rain or rains too much, or if locusts come or the mill floods or rats get bold, or your lord takes more than he should, well, there goes the harvest. During harvest, you work until your hands bleed. You cut with sickles, bind with straw haul sheaves across fields under a hot, unflinching sky. The work is communal, frantic, and full of songs designed to distract you from the pain in your lower back. If you're lucky, there's ale waiting at the end. If you're not, you collapse into bed too tired to eat. There's no weekend, no PTO. The only break you get is on holy days, over 50 of them a year. And even then, there's still firewood to chop, animals to feed, and a roof to thatch before it caves in. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly miserable or just very tired and mostly okay with it. Some evidence shows they had more holidays than modern workers. Others argue those holidays were spent doing unpaid church chores or extra work for their lord. So, yay, women work just as hard. They milk cows, tend gardens, brew ale, bake bread, weave cloth, sew clothing, and care for a dozen children, half of whom are currently eating dirt. They haul water from wells, sometimes several times a day. Each bucket weighs more than a goose and sloshes just enough to soak your hem. You still do it. No one else will. Children work too. By age 5, they're scaring birds from crops with rattles. By age 8, they're helping in the fields. By 12, they're full-fledged workers. No cartoons, no TikTok, just turnips and blisters. If you're not a peasant, maybe you're an artisan. You live in a town, part of a guild. You're a blacksmith, cobbler, cooper, mason, or weaver. Your day starts early with pounding hammers or whirring wheels and ends when your fingers stop cooperating. Guilds are both helpful and strict. They train you as an apprentice, feed you while you learn, and expect you to follow their rules. No shortcuts, no price gouging, no selling subpar goods. Mess it up, and you're fined or expelled. Become a master, and you can open your own shop. Maybe even take on apprentices of your own teenagers eager to learn a trade and escape the fields. Workshops are noisy, smoky, and occasionally dangerous. A slip of the hammer, a frayed rope, a spark near the wool vat, and you're one bandaged limb away from begging. There's no workers' comp, no health insurance, just prayer and poultices. Then there are the traveling merchants hustling from town to town with carts full of fabrics, spices, or tools. Their lives sound exciting until you realize how often they get robbed, rained on, or fined for not having the right market license. Still, they get to see the world, or at least the next village over. And what about the upper class? Surely they rest easy, fanning themselves in silk robes, sipping wine, nibbling on preserved pears. Sort of, nobles don't work in the fields, but they manage estates, train for war, hunt for game, and sit through endless legal disputes. They ride horses daily, learn archery practice, swordsmanship, and write letters on vellum. Their office includes falconry diplomacy and figuring out how to tax you even more efficiently. Ladies of noble birth. They spin, weave, manage servants, host guests, and play the medieval version of social chess. Their day is a blur of embroidery, prayer, household logistics, and dodging suitors with questionable teeth. Some even study music or Latin if they have the luxury. But no one truly rests. Even beggars work shouting stories, faking injuries, crafting pitiful expressions. Monks labor in gardens and scriptoria. Priests hear confessions for hours. Everyone from dung collector to duke is part of the great medieval machine grinding forward one exhausting day at a time. You finish your tasks with dirt under your nails and straw in your hair. You're sore, thirsty, and tired in that full-body way that makes your bones hum. But you did it. You survived another workday. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The sun's setting behind the thatched rooftops now, and the evening air smells like wood smoke and sheep. You're thinking about rest, but not so fast. The night belongs to stories, shadows, and secrets. Because in the Middle Ages, when the sky turns black, the world doesn't fall asleep. It just changes faces. First, you finish your last chore. Maybe it's locking up the animals if you're lucky enough to own any, or sweeping the hearth with a broom made of twigs. Maybe it's fetching one last bucket of water from the village, well hoping you don't drop it again. You've already slipped once this week, and the bruise on your hip is shaped suspiciously like a bucket handle. Then you bar the door. Because night isn't just about sleep, it's about danger. Without streetlights or alarms, darkness belongs to thieves, wolves, and things much harder to explain. You push the bolt closed, hang a charm above the door, and maybe whisper a prayer under your breath. You might light a candle or two if you're well off. Most nights it's just the fire's dying glow, and a rushlight, an oil-soaked reed wedged in a bit of clay. It flickers, it sputters, and it smells faintly of old cheese. But it's enough to see by while you undo your shoes and loosen your belt. Now the storytelling begins. Because in a world without Netflix or podcasts, your entertainment comes from memory. You sit by the hearth, your knees pulled close, as someone, an uncle, a cousin, the oldest neighbor, still upright, starts weaving a tale. Maybe it's about a knight who fought a giant, or a maiden who outwitted the devil with a chicken and a riddle, or a true story from two villages over where someone saw glowing lights in the woods and heard voices with no mouths. You listen wide-eyed, scratching your ankle absently. A mouse rustles in the corner. You ignore it. The story's getting good. And the stories aren't just fun, they're warnings. Don't go into the woods alone. Don't whistle after dark. Don't mock the old woman who mutters to herself and feeds crows from her apron. These tales shape your world. They tell you who to trust, where to walk, and which tree not to sit under when the moon's full. Sometimes the stories are true, or true-ish, like the one about the village where everyone danced for 3 days straight until they collapsed. Historians still argue whether that was a plague, a curse, or just an outbreak of extreme medieval partying. Either way, you file that story away under things I hope never happen here. Bedtime is a process. There's no mattress waiting for you. Just a sack of straw if you're lucky, and a blanket woven so long ago no one remembers who started it. Families sleep together for warmth. You, your siblings, maybe even the parents if the wind's bad. If you're visiting someone, you'll be offered the foot of their bed or a pile of cloaks in the corner. And yes, you sleep in your clothes. Mostly. Nightgowns exist, but they're a luxury. You keep your tunic on, maybe loosen the laces, and try not to think about how many fleas you're pressing into the pillow. You settle in, curled up like a comma, and listen to the night. It's not quiet. There's the wind groaning through the shutters, dogs barking 2 fields away, owls calling. Occasionally something thumps on the roof, probably a branch, or a cat, or something else. You hope it's a cat. Before you drift off, someone might recite a charm. Not quite a prayer, but not a prayer either. Something about keeping the demons away, or blessing the hearth, so the fire doesn't go out, or asking Saint Eligius to guard your dreams. You murmur it back, just in case. And if you're in a town, the night feels different. There are watchmen walking the streets, calling the hour. They shout things like all's well or the bell tolls 9. Sometimes they're drunk. Sometimes they're asleep under the watchtower. Either way, their voices echo down the stone alleys. Not that those alleys are empty. Thieves creep around looking for unlocked doors or drunk travelers. Stray dogs fight over scraps. Lovers meet in shadowy corners, whispering and giggling until one of them gets nervous and bolts. And in the darker corners of town, things move that no one wants to name. You dream of them sometimes. The creatures from the stories. Things with too many teeth or none at all. Shapes that slide under doors and whisper your name. You wake up sweating your arms tangled in the blanket the rushlight burned out. You whisper another charm. It can't hurt. Now let's talk sleep patterns. You don't sleep straight through the night. That's a modern invention. In the Middle Ages, most people slept in 2 shifts, first sleep and second sleep. After going to bed at dusk, you might wake up around midnight. Not because something disturbed you, but because that's just how sleep works here. For an hour or 2, you sit by the fire, tend the embers, maybe say a prayer, or have a snack. Then you drift off again. Historians still debate why this happened. Some think it's natural. Others blame the cold or the noises or the ale. But for you, it's just normal. You wake, you breathe, you stretch, you sleep again. If you're rich, you might have a canopy bed with curtains to trap heat. Maybe even a feather mattress. But you also sleep with a dagger under the pillow and a dog at the foot. Comfort comes with paranoia. And if you're poor like most, you dream about warmth more than anything else. You tuck your feet under your siblings' legs and sigh into the straw. It itches, it smells, but it's home. Tomorrow will come with chores, hunger bells, and stories all over again. But tonight you're wrapped in wool, surrounded by breath and snoring and safety. You drift into dreams, some strange, some soft, some filled with dancing saints and whispering woods. And all across your village, people sleep the same way. Well, most of them. Morning comes and the cold punches you in the face before your eyes even open. You grope for your cloak, scratch at your neck, and sit up slowly, careful not to wake whoever's still curled next to you. The fire's gone to ash. You shiver, stretch, and look around. Yep. Same four walls, same roof beams, same faint smell of cabbage and goat. Welcome to another glorious medieval day. Your first task, get dressed. Except you already are. You slept in your tunic, your hose are still on, and your boots are by the hearth stiff from yesterday's wet walk to the mill. You splash a bit of cold water on your face, maybe if any's left from the night. No soap, just enough to shock your skin awake. And now it's time to get presentable, which for you means not looking like you spent the night wrestling a badger. Medieval grooming is a game of low-tech ingenuity, and you play it with tools that are, well, let's say rustic. You reach for your dagger, not to fight anyone, though you might consider it if someone ate your last turnip, but to shave. Daggers double as razors. There are no safety guards, no foaming creams, just a sharpened blade and hope. You drag it across your chin or your armpit or your hairline slowly, carefully. You've got a few scars to show for early mistakes. Women sometimes pluck their hairline to raise the forehead, a sign of noble beauty. You might see a lady with no eyebrows and a hairline halfway back to her ears. Strange, yes, but trends are trends. People will do just about anything for fashion. Remember those shoes with the 2-foot toes. As for mirrors, if you're lucky, you own a polished piece of metal or a tiny bit of blown glass. Distorted, cloudy, and flattering to no one. You groom mostly by feel, by guess, or with the help of a very honest sibling. Let's talk about teeth. You've still got a few, maybe even most, but they ache, constantly. Medieval dental hygiene is imaginative. You don't brush. Toothbrushes won't appear in Europe for a while. Instead, you chew on twigs, rub your teeth with cloth, or use ashes and salt to scrub away grime. Sometimes sage leaves, sometimes mint, sometimes just your own spit and a finger. And when a tooth goes bad, which it will, you can either live with the pain or yank it out. No anesthesia, no sterilization. Just a strong friend, a pair of iron pliers, and some seriously loud screaming. Some say biting a leather strap helps. Others say it's better to faint halfway through. You've heard of toothworms, tiny creatures that live in the roots of your molars and cause rot. Everyone believes in them. Why else would teeth hurt like that? Historians still argue about whether people genuinely saw these worms, maybe bits of infected pulp, or just invented them as a comforting explanation. Regardless if your jaw swells, someone's heating an onion. You press the warm bulb against your cheek and pray. Or someone suggests a poultice made from roasted mouse and honey. It smells awful, but you're desperate. Hair care. That's a whole other adventure. You wash it maybe once every few weeks. Maybe. When you do, you use lye soap, which is as gentle as sandpaper and twice as drying. You rinse with vinegar or rainwater. Conditioner doesn't exist. Your hair's either greasy, brittle, or both. You comb it with a bone or wood comb and hope the lice don't fight back. Men often keep their hair shortish, unless they're nobles showing off with curled locks and oiled beards. Women usually braid it, pin it, or tuck it under a veil. Hair is sacred and scandalous all at once. You don't show it off lightly. To leave it uncovered in public is to send a message and not a subtle one. And what's that smell, is it you probably? Bathing isn't daily or weekly. You might bathe seasonally, if that. Some towns have public bathhouses, but they're shared, steamy, and not always clean. You sit in a wooden tub with strangers wearing a modesty cloth, sweating in silence. It's warm, yes. Cleansing, debatable. People believed that hot water opened your pores to disease. Too much bathing could make you sick. So instead, you wipe yourself down with a damp cloth. Change your underlayer and call it a victory. Perfume helps, or incense, or crushed herbs rubbed into your skin. rosemary, lavender, sage, whatever masks the goat smell without inviting fleas. And now you've got to deal with your nails. Long nails are a sign of idleness. You cut them short with a knife, chew them down, or ignore them until they start catching on things. Some folks polish them with pumice stone. Others just let the dirt under them become part of the aesthetic. You step outside boots on belt-tight hair mostly in place. You take a deep breath. The air smells of dung smoke and damp wool. Your skin feels itchy, your scalp a bit too warm, and your teeth have that fuzzy feeling that means it's going to be another day of chewing carefully. Still, you look good. For a medieval villager, it starts with a beat, a drum maybe, or someone clapping their palms echoing through the town square. You look up from your work brow furrowed. The cobbler's son is hopping from foot to foot, and the old fishwife is spinning with a grin that's far too wide. Strange, but not entirely unusual, until it doesn't stop. The clapping becomes stomping. The stomping becomes spinning. People dance with vacant eyes, bodies drenched in sweat, feet bruised and bleeding. And still they twirl, for hours, for days, in some places weeks. This isn't a celebration. It's a plague. The dancing plague. Yes, really. You've heard of it whispered about between prayers and field chores. In 1374, in the town of Aachen, Germany, people began to dance uncontrollably. It spread. Dozens, then hundreds, moving in convulsions, foaming at the mouth, collapsing from exhaustion, and still twitching. And then it happened again in Strasbourg in 1518. One woman started it. Days later, nearly 400 were swept into the frenzy. Historians still argue what caused it. Mass hysteria, ergot poisoning from moldy rye, religious fervor gone wrong, possession. A socially contagious neurological event no one knows. But you're living in an age where superstition and miracle often sleep in the same bed. So of course you believe. You see dancing as divine or demonic. Either way, people start praying. The bishop orders a procession. Others call for music, believing the dancers need to exhaust the spirit possessing them. So they play pipes, drums, fiddles until the square becomes a feverish festival of flailing limbs and shattered nerves. You step back, clutching your cloak. You want to help, but what could you possibly do? Bind their feet, that's been tried. Lock them in, they'll pound their skulls against the wall until the rhythm stops, or they do. This is no ordinary festival. But festivals do happen, and they're much more fun. Feast days bring music jugglers and dancing that doesn't involve foaming at the mouth. You've seen the maypole raised high and the springtime ribbons flying like heraldic snakes. You've joined hands with neighbors stomping in circles to lutes and flutes and tambourines. Medieval dances aren't always elegant. They're bouncy, rowdy, and often repetitive. You don't waltz, you hop. You don't tango, you circle step to the beat of a drum made from goat hide. Partners might not be your choice, and steps are often improvised. If you've had enough ale, you don't even notice that you've stepped on the Reeves' foot 3 times. Music fills the air, and not always in tune. Minstrels roam from town to town, singing of knights and dragons, saints and sinners. Some play instruments you've never seen, hurdy-gurdies, sackbuts, rebecks. Others carry bones or spoons, clacking out rhythms that make children laugh and chickens scatter. Dance is both joy and ritual. You dance at weddings. You dance at wakes. You dance to forget to flirt, to feel something other than cold mud and aching joints. It's how you mark life's rhythm. Just not that kind of dancing. Because you can't stop thinking about the plague dancers. The way they twitched. The way their eyes didn't blink. The priests said it was punishment for sin. The herbalists said it was bad air. One old woman said she saw their feet bleeding through their shoes. It's not just dancing either. strange movements pop up across the centuries. Convulsions in convents, mass faintings, even outbreaks of laughter that leave entire villages gasping. Today we might call them psychological phenomena. Then you called them curses. Back in your own town, things settle. The spring festival is near. You're preparing for the fair, and your neighbors are already sewing ribbons into their cloaks. You hear the carpenter humming something that sounds suspiciously like a jig. You tap your toe. On festival day, the whole village gathers. There's a bonfire, a stage, and more pies than you've seen in months. Someone brings a dulcimer, and before you know it, you're holding hands and spinning with a girl you don't know and a boy who smells like cheese. You laugh, trip, recover, and leap again. Your feet hurt. Your chest burns. Your cheeks are red. And for a moment, you remember those cursed dancers. You wonder if they felt like this at first, weightless, giddy, like they might never need to sleep again. And then someone yells, "That's enough," and the music stops. You gasp, stagger, and sit down hard on a patch of hay. Thank heaven. You needed that. Later that night, you lie awake, feet sore, still smiling. You think about rhythm, about the danger of joy taken too far, about how laughter and fear sometimes wear the same mask. The Middle Ages don't give you neat answers, just stories, half warnings, half wonders. So you fall asleep wondering what tomorrow's story will be. You wake to the sound of shouting. Not the usual rooster, not the bells, it's sharper, panicked. You pull on your boots and duck outside, heart quickening. And there it is, crawling its way down the lane like something out of a nightmare fire. In the Middle Ages, fire is not cozy. It's not candlelight and cuddles. It's destruction. One careless spark, one overturned lamp, one cooking pot left too long, and your entire village could vanish before breakfast. You don't just fear fire, you respect it. Because here flames don't just warm you, they own you. Your houses are made of timber, plaster, thatch, basically kindling. Chimneys are a luxury. Most homes have a hearth in the middle of the room, the smoke venting lazily through a hole in the roof. That's generous wording. Vent really just means floats up and hopefully doesn't choke anyone first. You can still smell last week's soup in the rafters, and now someone's roof is crackling. You hear neighbors yelling for water. Buckets appear like magic, wooden heavy, passed hand to hand. There's no fire brigade. You are the fire brigade. It's not just your home you're worried about, it's the whole village. Once thatched roofs catch the flames, leap like they've been waiting all week. Wind makes it worse. Rain, too late. So you toss bucket after bucket, shouting, sweating, slipping. Your hands go numb from splinters and cold water. Your arms tremble, but you keep going. Eventually the fire dies or burns itself out. The damage, one house, maybe two. A shed, a chicken coop, sadly. The smell of smoke lingers in your hair for days. The family who lost their home is taken in by neighbors, and someone starts muttering about whether this is punishment for not tithing last Sunday. You don't argue. It might be. After the fire, you spend weeks rebuilding. Everyone pitches in. There's no insurance, no paperwork, no comforting insurance adjuster asking questions with a clipboard. You do it yourself. If you're lucky, your Lord lends you wood. If not, you repurpose what's left of the scorched beams. You've become very good at turning disaster into livable. Of course, fire is only one threat. Rain can be worse. A flood, devastating. If the nearby river swells, your fields go first. Grain is ruined, livestock drowns, roads vanish into soup. Mud replaces everything. Your shoes become suggestions. Your cartwheels sink like stones. And yet life continues. You rebuild. You dry your few clothes by the fire. You patch the roof with moss and a prayer. Disasters are part of the cycle. You expect them. but you never get used to them. Wind, equally dramatic. A good storm can peel off a roof like it's opening a pie. Trees fall, walls crumble, and if lightning strikes, oh now it's a sign. God is angry, probably at your neighbor, or that guy who keeps skipping church. Then there are vermin, the tiny disasters. Rats chew through grain stores, mice nibble wool, fleas spread faster than gossip. If you've got a cat, she's your hero. If not, you clap pots together at night, hoping to scare something back into the shadows. You once heard of a town that tried to excommunicate a swarm of locusts, sent a priest out with holy water and a furious Latin chant. Did it work? Depends who you ask. The crops still failed, but the priest came home with his dignity intact. Mostly. Plagues are the worst of them all, and not just the big ones. Sure, you've heard of the Black Death, and maybe even lived through whispers of it, but illnesses are everywhere. Fever, flux, egg pox. Each has its own rhythm and none are kind. Someone coughs too hard in church and heads turn. Someone's child goes quiet overnight and the midwife is summoned. Herbs are boiled, candles lit, saints invoked, doctors rare. And if they do appear, they're more likely to bleed you than save you. A popular cure for nearly anything: drain a pint of blood. Maybe apply a leech. Maybe burn a smelly rag near the patient's nose. It's not medicine, it's ritual. You've seen plague doctors in drawings, long cloaks, strange bird-like masks filled with herbs. You've never met one. You hope you never do. If they arrive, it's already too late. And yet, through all this, the world keeps turning. Someone loses a roof. Someone else shares their loaf of bread. The sheep escape in the rain, and 6 muddy children chase them through the fields like giggling lunatics. A baby is born during a lightning storm, and the midwife swears it means the child is destined for greatness. Even amid disaster, there's laughter. After the fire, someone starts rebuilding their wall with mud and old planks. You help. Someone else brings stew. You all sit together under a sagging awning, eating in the smoky twilight. Someone tells a joke about a one-legged farmer and a forgetful priest, and you laugh so hard you choke on a bean. Because in the Middle Ages, resilience isn't a choice, it's a skill. One you practice every time the roof leaks, the cart breaks, or the chicken wanders into the fire and explodes. Yes, that happens. Feathers everywhere. You sigh, rub your eyes, and toss another log onto the fire, this one safely contained in your hearth. Tomorrow might bring rain or rats or worse, but tonight you're warm. For now, that's enough. By now you've noticed that things in the Middle Ages tend to smell strongly. But there's one particular scent you never get used to: the unmistakable funk of the market square. It's where you go for news goods, gossip, and the occasional pickpocketing. It's loud, messy, colorful, and strangely theatrical. Welcome to your medieval mall. It's not open every day. Market day comes once or twice a week, depending on the size of your town. When it does, the whole place transforms. Stalls pop up like mushrooms after rain. Merchants roll in with wagons of goods from neighboring villages, or if you're near a port or crossroads, maybe from across the known world. Spices from the Levant, wool from Flanders, wine from Gascony, shoes from someone's shed. You arrive early, coin pouch tucked deep under your belt. You don't trust anyone, not even the toothless old lady selling pickled onions. She has shifty eyes. The ground's muddy, trampled from last night's rain and this morning's traffic. You sidestep a puddle, barely misstepping in something worse, horse pig who knows, and make your way toward the stalls. There's no order, no zoning. Fishmonger next to blacksmith, next to fortune teller, next to someone yelling about how his turnips are more God-fearing than anyone else's. It's chaos, but it's your chaos. You stop by the cloth seller. He's unrolling bolts of rough linen dyed in colors that would make a modern fashion designer weep. "See here," he cries. "Imported dyed with real madder root." You squint. It's reddish, also a bit moth-eaten. You nod slowly, then keep walking. Over at the butcher's stall, things get visceral. Blood still dripping from a pig's foot. Flies buzz in lazy circles. The butcher waves them off with a rag that hasn't seen soap since the last plague. He grins, missing 3 teeth, and offers you half a rabbit and something he calls mystery pie. You politely decline. There's music, of course. Minstrels try to outplay each other, one strumming a lute with enthusiasm that far outpaces talent, while another juggles knives and recites half-remembered ballads. You tip them a farthing. They bow like you handed them a crown. And then there's the town crier, clanging his bell like it owes him money. Hear ye, he yells. Everyone pauses. New taxes on wool announced Lord Evermont to wed Lady Cecily on Michaelmas, lost 1 goat with a twisted horn and terrible manners. People chuckle. You think you've seen that goat. Gossip flows faster than ale. You hear that the miller's daughter is expecting again, that the tanner's apprentice ran off with a band of traveling monks, that someone saw a dragon-shaped cloud over the abbey last Thursday. You nod solemnly. Dragons are always a possibility. Trade is mostly by barter unless you're rich enough to deal in silver pennies. You trade eggs for a length of rope, a hen for some salted herring, and your last decent shoe for a new clay pot, because yours shattered last week when a goat ran through the house. Again. You haggle. Oh, do you haggle? It's a dance of flattery threats and theatrical gasps. The vegetable seller insists her carrots are blessed by St. Bridget herself. You remind her you've seen those same carrots rolling in ditch water behind her stall. Eventually, you both settle. She gets your cheese. You get her carrots. Everyone pretends they won. Then you hear a voice rise louder than the rest. Not selling, preaching. A friar stands on a barrel waving his arms. Repent, the end is nigh, vanity is your doom. You pause, mouth full of aniseed biscuit. He stares directly at you. You chew faster. Street performers are everywhere. Tumblers, fire eaters, dancing bears. Yes, bears. Chained, muzzled, and paraded around by handlers who claim they came from the darkest corners of the East. Poor thing looks more bored than feral. Some towns even have a fool, a licensed jester given permission to mock authority, insult the mayor, and make rude gestures without getting thrown in jail. You envy him a little. Historians still argue whether markets were more economic hubs or social spectacles. Truth is, they were both. You came to buy grain, but stayed to hear news, flirt, argue about politics, and maybe join a traveling show if the mood struck you. Now and then, there's a fair bigger than the market and more exciting. Royal charters grant towns the right to host them once a year. Merchants from far-off lands arrive wearing strange clothes, selling strange goods. You see silks, peppers, tiny glass mirrors. You want everything. You can afford nothing. You settle for an ornamental spoon and a pastry shaped like a swan. But even markets have rules. A local bailiff patrols, making sure weights aren't rigged, and no one's selling rotten fish labeled as fresh catch. Fines are handed out. Sometimes stocks are used for public shaming. This man watered his wine, someone will yell, and a tomato is launched. Then there are thieves. Pickpockets roam like ghosts. You feel a tug at your pouch and spin around too late. A boy is already vanishing into the crowd. You sigh, clutch what's left, and move on. Still, the market is your favorite day. It's alive, vibrant, messy, and it makes the monotony of fieldwork almost bearable. You leave with your arms full, bread thread, maybe a second-hand knife. The sun's setting, the stalls are being packed, and the streets echo with leftover music and clinking hooves. You're exhausted, but there's a strange satisfaction in your bones. Tomorrow it's back to dirt and thatch and bells. But today you haggled, laughed, danced, and maybe flirted with a tanner's apprentice who winked at you from behind a cart of suspiciously damp hides. A successful outing by any medieval standard. You don't remember falling asleep, only the sweet ache of your feet from too much walking and haggling at the market. But now you're awake, staring at the dark beams above your head, blinking at the sound of bells. Church bells. Again. You groan softly. Because today is not about trade or chores. Today is a holy day, and that means church. In the Middle Ages, religion is the framework that holds your world together. Birth, love, death, harvest, sickness, storms, dancing plagues, everything has a saint or scripture attached to it. You don't question it. You breathe it. Your day, like everyone's, is governed by the liturgical calendar. More than 150 feast days a year, countless saints' days, plus regular Mass. The bells mark the hours, the prayers, the moments you're supposed to pause, bow your head, and think about eternity. You wipe your face, brush the dust off your tunic, and head toward the church. It's small stone or wood, depending on your village's resources, and perpetually cold. The floor is dirt. The roof leaks. But it's the most important building for miles. As you approach, you see the priest outside muttering something to himself and adjusting his robes. You nod respectfully. He knows Latin after all. That makes him powerful, mysterious, possibly magical. You once saw him heal a sick pig just by sprinkling water and saying something you didn't understand. Or maybe the pig just got better on its own. Still impressive. Inside the church, you dip your fingers in the holy water, cold, always cold, cross yourself, and shuffle into your usual spot. There are no pews unless you're in a wealthier parish. You stand, you kneel, you sit on a bench if one's available. If not, you sit on your heels and try not to make eye contact with the widow who always smells like onions. Mass begins. And here's the thing, it's all in Latin. You don't speak Latin. You don't need to speak Latin. You just follow along, murmuring what you've memorized, listening to the chants echo off the damp walls. The priest's back is to you. That's how it goes. He faces the altar, not the crowd. This isn't a TED Talk. It's a holy ritual passed down from time immemorial. There's incense bells, raised hands, and whispers. You know when to kneel, when to cross yourself, when to mumble Amen. You feel a strange peace settle over you, not from understanding necessarily, but from rhythm. The repetition of sacred words, the scent of incense, the flickering of candles in the gloom, it's all familiar, eternal. Then comes the homily in your language, thankfully. Today's topic, pride, or envy, or disobedience. The priest warns against vanity, reminds everyone that God sees everything, even what you whispered to your neighbor during the fishmonger's juggling act yesterday. You feel your ears turn red. After Mass, you shuffle outside with the crowd. There's bread to bless a baby to sprinkle, and one very sick-looking sheep that someone's brought for emergency prayer. The priest sighs, says a few lines, and hands the animal back with a pat. You linger outside because church is where people talk, where deals are made, marriages arranged, grudges aired. Today you overhear that the baker's son might be sent to the monastery, that the priest's niece was seen walking too close to a stable boy, that someone stole a pewter cup from the altar again. Monasteries are another world entirely. If you'd been born into a different family, or had a particularly spiritual aunt, you might have ended up there. The monks rise before dawn, pray 7 times a day, and copy manuscripts with aching hands and ink-stained fingers. It's quiet, disciplined, Peaceful. Well, usually. Unless you're in a monastery famous for brewing beer or growing medicinal herbs, then there's a steady hum of industry. Some monks are brilliant, others just quiet. All of them sleep in cold cells and eat a lot of lentils. Nuns live similarly structured lives in their own convents. They're not all cloistered away from the world. Some run schools, tend to the sick, or manage estates. They know how to read, write, think. You'd be surprised how many quiet revolutions start behind convent walls. And speaking of revolution, heresy is always a whispered danger. The church is powerful. To question it openly is to risk everything. But there are murmurs. People who say the priest is too rich, that indulgences are a scam, that God might care more about kindness than tithing. Historians still argue how widespread religious doubt really was before the Reformation. But from your perspective, questioning doctrine means risking excommunication or worse. So you toe the line. You confess your sins. You fast on command. You join the Corpus Christi procession each year, winding through muddy lanes, holding a candle and singing slightly off-key. And deep down you do believe. Because how could you not? When the sky thunders, when the harvest fails, when your child burns with fever, you fall to your knees and beg the saints for mercy. You leave coins at the chapel, light candles, make promises, miracles happen. At least you've heard they do. A blind girl once saw the Virgin in a puddle. A soldier's wound healed overnight. A rooster crowed after being stewed, proving a man's innocence. These stories travel faster than trade routes. You hold them close. Religion isn't separate from life. It's woven into everything. You don't eat without saying grace. You don't sneeze without crossing yourself. You don't look at a rainbow without thinking of God's promise to Noah. Even your curses are sacred, God's wounds by the holy nails, St. Dunstan's beard, and when you sin, and you will, you confess. The confessional's dark close. The priest listens, barely reacts. You list your failings, you cursed at your neighbor, you lied about your flower stock, you envied the Reeves' new boots. He tells you your penance. Say 5 prayers. Do a good deed. Maybe donate a candle. You nod. You'll do it. Probably. Back home, you light your hearth again, knees aching from too much kneeling. You hang a blessed cross over the door just in case. And before bed, you murmur a quick Our Father, hands folded over your chest. Tomorrow you might gossip, grumble, steal a plum, but tonight for a moment you feel forgiven. Morning again. The light seeps through the shutters like a judgmental ghost, and you groan. Your knees still ache from kneeling at Mass. Your feet still hurt from market day. And you've got a splinter in your thumb from helping patch the neighbor's fence. But none of that matters, because today your cousin's getting married. And that means a medieval wedding, half holy sacrament, half unhinged party, and all kinds of confusing. First, there's the business side. Marriage in the Middle Ages isn't primarily about love. It's about land alliances, dowries, and keeping cows in the right bloodline. Even among peasants, matchmaking is strategic. You don't just marry someone because they smell like lavender and smiled at you at the feast. You marry them because their father owns the pasture next to yours, or because their aunt is owed a favor by the reeve. Your cousin, let's call her Maud, is beaming, but you're not entirely sure if it's from joy or nerves. She's barely 15. Her betrothed is 21, already missing 2 teeth, and once lost a chicken while sober. A solid match by local standards. Marriage doesn't require a priest, technically. A couple just needs to make vows in front of witnesses. But the church would really prefer to be involved. They've worked hard to bring marriage under their jurisdiction, so there will be a blessing. maybe even a mass. You arrive early dressed in your second-best tunic, the one with only 2 patches on the sleeve. The wedding is outside the church at the entrance, where vows are made in full public view. Because nothing says sacred bond like being stared at by every gossip in a 10-mile radius. The priest speaks. The couple vows. Coins change hands. Her dowry, small but respectable, includes a goat, 3 hens, and a comb. Then the real celebration begins. And oh, the celebration. There's food, ale, music. Someone's roasting a pig. The smell drifts through the meadow and makes you forget how damp your shoes are. Children run wild, flinging bits of bread at each other. An uncle starts singing before noon. No one stops him. The bride's veil is pinned with flowers. The groom's cloak is new, probably borrowed. There's a garland of rosemary above the table, a symbol of fidelity. You chew on a sprig, absently watching the dancers spiral into a wild circle that may or may not end in someone's twisted ankle. And the jokes. So many jokes. Weddings are as much about bawdy humor as about solemn vows. A man in the corner makes a pun so inappropriate that the midwife actually snorts into her wine. You don't catch all of it, but you gather it involves a goose, a church bell, and a pair of stockings. As the sun lowers, a ceremonial bedding is prepared. In some places, the couple is led to their bed with a parade of laughter and teasing. Guests toss nuts and sing songs while the newlyweds attempt to disappear beneath the blankets. In other areas, the custom is more symbolic, just a sign that the marriage has been consummated or will be soon. Either way, it's all very awkward. Historians still argue how formalized this ritual was. Some say it was playful. Others claim it veered into uncomfortable territory. For you, it's enough to know you're not the one getting married tonight. Not all weddings are festive. Sometimes marriages are arranged under pressure between families, between lords, even by decree. A nobleman might marry off his daughter to a political ally she's never met. A widower might remarry purely to produce more heirs. Love, that's a luxury, a risk, and usually arrives after the vows, if it ever does. Still, you've seen couples that seem happy. They laugh together, share chores, sneak kisses when they think no one's watching. It gives you hope. Maybe one day you'll find someone who laughs at your jokes and doesn't mind your habit of quoting saints at breakfast. Divorce. Not really a thing. The church allows annulments under specific circumstances, non-consummation consanguinity being too closely related, or proof that one party was coerced. But it's rare and messy. Easier to just live apart unofficially or send one spouse to a convent and hope for the best. For widows and widowers, remarriage is common. Life is short. Practicality wins. You bury one spouse, mourn, and within a year, maybe less, you're back at the church doors with a new proposal and a fresh goat. And let's not forget the matchmaking. In villages, it's an unofficial sport. Mothers whisper about eligible sons. Aunts make casual comments about how lovely someone looked at Mass. If you're single, you are very much on display. Of course, the church preaches about marriage's holiness. It's a sacrament, a bond before God. But it's also the foundation of inheritance economics and community survival. Every wedding is a transaction wrapped in a garland. As night falls, you watch your cousin and her new husband sway in a circle lit by torchlight and cheered on by half-drunken villagers. The music is lopsided. The dancers are offbeat. But the joy, that's real. You sip your ale, steal another meat pie from the table, and wonder what your own wedding will be like if it ever comes. Until then, you've got stories to tell, jokes to remember, and a rosemary sprig you're keeping in your pouch for luck. The next morning, your head is throbbing like someone's playing a tambourine inside it, and you swear off ale for the third time this month. But there's no rest for the tired, not in the Middle Ages. Because as you stretch and yawn and rub your temples, someone calls out that it's your turn to help with the town watch. Yes, that's right. You sleepy, slightly hungover, occasionally clumsy, you are now responsible for keeping your village safe. Unlike the shiny, armor-clad city guards you've heard about in stories, your local watch is mostly made up of neighbors with sturdy boots and uneven tempers. It's more neighborhood patrol than organized military unit, and it's your civic duty. Don't show up, and you might find yourself fined, shamed, or stuck mucking out latrines as penance. You pull on your cloak, grab a torch, and head to the meeting point. It's already dusk. The sky is bruising purple, and the air has that damp, metallic scent that promises rain or regret. A few others wait with you: Tom, the cooper, Ellen, the tanner's wife, who once wrestled a stray dog into submission, and old Arnulf, who's mostly blind, but insists he can still hear crime. Your job: keep an eye out. That's it. Look for fires, thieves, drunkards, and anything that doesn't belong. You walk the perimeter of the village, boots squelching, torches guttering in the wind. The darkness out here doesn't play, it swallows. Every creak, every rustle, every distant bleat makes your imagination do cartwheels. Sometimes you sing softly, just to hear something familiar. Sometimes Ellen tells stories about the time she chased a would-be burglar into a pigsty and sat on him until morning. She's your favorite person right now. Every so often you pass the night watch bell, a little station with a rope and a wooden hammer. If something really bad happens, you ring it, loudly. Then pray that someone more qualified shows up. But it's not just the watch you worry about. In larger towns, law enforcement is more complicated. There's a constable appointed by the lord or town council who enforces laws, catches criminals, and makes you nervous even when you're innocent. Then there's the reeve part official part snitch who keeps tabs on everyone's business and reports back to the manorial court. Trials, oh, those are something else. If you're accused of a crime, you might find yourself at a manorial court, the lowest level of medieval justice run by your lord or his steward. Charges range from stealing geese to trespassing to letting your pigs wander into someone else's cabbage patch. You're expected to attend court whether you're guilty, innocent, or just curious. More serious crimes like arson, murder, or heresy go to royal courts where things get spicier. Trials there might involve ordeals. Yes, ordeals. Trial by water, trial by fire, trial by combat. Let's say you're accused of stealing a relic. You proclaim your innocence. The court doesn't have evidence. This is the 1300s, not CSI, so they toss you into a river. If you float, you're guilty. If you sink, you're innocent. Technically. Hopefully someone pulls you out in time. Fire ordeal. You carry a red-hot iron bar for a few paces. Then they wrap your hand and wait 3 days. If the wound festers, guilty. If it heals cleanly, divine intervention says you're free to go. Science, unfortunately, has not yet entered the chat. Historians still debate how often ordeals were used. Some think they were mostly symbolic. Others believe they were common in earlier centuries, gradually replaced by oaths and witnesses. Either way, you hope never to be on trial. Then there's hue and cry. If you see a crime, you're legally required to yell loudly, "Stop thief," or the medieval equivalent. You chase the criminal. The whole village is expected to join in. Imagine a mob of villagers waving pitchforks, someone in slippers, someone still holding bread. It's not elegant, but it works. Punishments vary. Fines are most common. Public shamings a close second. Stocks, pillories, or simply being paraded through town with a sign that says, "I stole turnips like a fool." People throw things, usually not soft things. Worse crimes: whipping, branding, ear clipping, in extreme cases, hanging. Executions are rare in small towns, but you've heard tales. You don't repeat them. Not before bed. There are no prisons like you'd imagine today. Some towns have jails, but they're temporary holding spaces. You don't serve time, you pay confess or get punished. Lingering in a cell is expensive and inefficient. Corruption, absolutely. If you're rich, you pay off a fine. If you're poor, you get punished harder. That's life. The law favors landowners and clergy. But sometimes, just sometimes, justice surprises everyone. You once heard about a baron's son caught stealing from a chapel. The local friar made him walk barefoot through the village carrying a candle, begging forgiveness. It was both humiliating and hilarious. You still joke about it with your friends, careful, or you'll get the candle walk. But not all watchwork is dramatic. Most nights it's quiet. You walk, you listen, you talk softly with your companions. Arnulf starts snoring while leaning against a tree. Ellen hums a lullaby. You feel the weight of the torch in your hand. Heavy, comforting. You pass a shuttered window and see candlelight flicker inside. A baby cries. Somewhere an owl calls. The world turns. At dawn, the watch ends. You hand off your torch, stretch your back, and drag yourself home. No one stole anything. No one died. That counts as a good shift. You collapse into your bed straw sack, scratchy blanket, lumpy pillow, and smile. You've kept the peace. At least for one more night. By midday, you're ankle-deep in mud, soaked through and cursing gently under your breath. You're not sick, not wounded, not even in trouble this time. You're just farming. Because in the Middle Ages, everyone is a farmer, or at least everyone is tethered to the land in some way. Lords own it, clergy bless it, and you bleed for it. You work a strip of land in the open field system common throughout much of medieval Europe. No neat fences or tidy plots. Just long, thin strips of farmland, divided by narrow paths, scattered like a game board across the landscape. You don't own your land. You're allowed to work it by your lord, your manor, your luck. Each year, you and your neighbors switch strips to ensure fairness. One strip might be rich with black soil. Another could be more rock than dirt. It all balances out. In theory. You rise with the sun, stretch your aching back, and begin. First, you plow. If you're lucky, you've got an ox. If not, it's a team effort. 2 people to guide the heavy wooden plow, another to shout encouragement, and at least one who mostly pretends to help. The soil is stubborn. It clings to the plow like it knows what's coming. You heave, grunt, and squelch forward. It's back-breaking, finger-numbing, spirit-dampening work. But you have to do it. No plowing, no food. No food, no future. Then comes sowing. You carry a leather pouch at your hip, reach in with calloused fingers, and scatter grain in wide arcs. Wheat, barley, rye depends on the season. Every handful is a prayer. You hope the birds don't steal too much. You hope it rains, but not too much. You hope. After sowing, you wait, but not idly. There are fences to mend tools, to fix weeds, to pull. You watch the sky like a gambler watches dice. Too much sun, crops shrivel. Too much rain, roots rot. You think about soil more than most people think about money. Farming isn't just a job. It's a gamble with God. Then come the pests. Crows, mice, beetles. You chase them off with claps, yells, crude scarecrows. In a particularly bad year, someone suggests burying a saint's relic at the field's edge. Another swears by cow urine and garlic. You try both. Sometimes they work. Sometimes the only thing growing is disappointment. And just when things are sprouting, nicely hail. or mildew, or a freak frost in late spring that wipes out your barley like it never existed. You sigh, stare at the heavens, and wonder if Saint Isidore the farmer has blocked your prayers. Harvest is different, urgent, joyful even. Everyone joins in. Men, women, children, chickens underfoot. You use a sickle or scythe, bending low, slicing in rhythm. The grain is bundled into sheaves, stacked into stooks, and carted off before the weather turns. It's hot, itchy work. You get blisters, you bleed, you keep going. During harvest, even gossip quiets. There's too much to do, too much riding on it, because once the grain's in, it has to be threshed. You do this in barns or open spaces, beating the grain with flails, two sticks connected by leather, swung like a particularly angry dance. The kernels separate from the husk. Your arms ache. Your back seizes. You push through. Then comes winnowing, tossing the grain in the air so the chaff blows away. It's delicate, satisfying. You watch the golden kernels fall like treasure, and for a moment you smile. This is the good part. But before you can celebrate, it's tithe season. The church takes 1/10 of your grain. The Lord takes his share too. You keep what's left. It's rarely enough, so you stretch it, add water, bake flatbreads, boil porridge, trade what you can't eat. If the harvest was poor, you face famine. Not dramatic instant starvation. No creeping hunger. Smaller portions, more soups, less meat. Eventually, chewing bark starts to seem reasonable. Historians still argue how frequent famines were. Some regions saw one every generation, others every decade. The worst years are remembered like curses. You once met a woman who still calls her daughter Ashwin after the year the fields all died. But sometimes, the land is kind. The rains come right. The sun stays gentle. The grain ripens tall and golden. And you feast. Well, by medieval standards, you bake big loaves. Roast a chicken if you're feeling fancy. Drink ale. You sit with neighbors and talk about how the carrots grew straight this year, an absolute miracle. Of course, there's crop rotation. The 3-field system means you plant one field with winter crops, wheat or rye, one with spring crops, peas or barley, and leave one fallow. The rotation keeps the soil alive, and you along with it. Manure is precious. Collected, stored, spread with care. Your nose never forgets it, but your fields thank you. And so do your children when they eat in winter. If you're serfs, you owe labor. You work your lord's domain land, his private fields, a few days each week. You sow his grain, harvest his apples, muck his pig stalls. Only then can you tend your own plots. Some call this feudal obligation. You call it life. And yet, despite the mud, the toil, the sore joints, and endless praying, there's a rhythm to it. A strange peace in planting, waiting, reaping. You don't need a calendar. The land tells you what time it is. You wipe your brow, squint at the sky, and sigh. The wheat is growing. The beans are behaving. A robin hops across the furrow. For now, at least, the earth is on your side. It's still dark when you wake up. Not just the sun hasn't risen dark, deep dark, the kind that hugs the edges of the walls and makes the corners of your cottage feel miles away. But your belly growls, and you know it's time to begin the day. You fumble for your shoes, pull your cloak tight, and wander to the hearth. The fire's out again, and you're too tired to restart it properly. So you settle for what every good medieval morning begins with beer soup. Yes, beer. For breakfast. You ladle out a scoop of yesterday's stew, thin it with ale, low alcohol, flat, more like barley tea than a pint of joy, and heat it over a candle flame. Toss in some bread, maybe an egg if you're feeling luxurious, and stir until it's more warm mush than liquid. You sip carefully. It's bitter, sour filling. Not great, but it keeps you upright. Why not water that's adorable? Water in your world is basically a death wish. You might as well invite dysentery to breakfast. Streams are polluted. Wells can be suspect. Rain barrels help, but they're not reliable year-round. Beer is safer thanks to the brewing process. So everyone drinks it. Children, elders, pregnant women, even monks who literally write beer recipes into their illuminated manuscripts. This isn't party beer. It's small beer, barely fermented and barely intoxicating. You'd have to drink gallons to feel a buzz, and you'd mostly feel the need to pee every 12 minutes. Which, by the way, involves squatting in the grass or using a wooden seat perched over a pit. Hygienic, number practical. Also no. But it's what you've got. After beer soup, it's off to work. But halfway through feeding the chickens, you remember it's a fasting day. You sigh. The church calendar requires you to fast roughly a third of the year. No meat, no dairy, and definitely no feasting on Saint What's-His-Name's Day, even if he was just added to the list last week. On fast days, you eat fish if you can afford it, or just more bread and peas. You've heard that beaver tails qualify as fish thanks to a church ruling, but you've never seen a beaver. Sounds like a rich man's workaround. Your meals revolve around bread pottage and whatever's in season. Bread is the constant. Sometimes made from wheat if you're lucky, or rye oats, or even a mix of questionable grains if times are hard. Coarse, dense, occasionally crunchy from stray pebbles in the flour. Yes, really. You've lost a tooth that way. Everyone has. Pottage is the default dish. A bubbling cauldron of lentils, onions, leeks, maybe bacon if someone's been generous. It simmers all day over the fire, replenished endlessly. You joke that if you ever stop eating pottage, your body might rebel. One time a friend tried adding nettles for flavor. It worked. Sort of. You itched for 3 days. On feast days, things get exciting. Roasted meats, honey cakes, fruit pies. But those are rare. Most days you eat what grows around you. Turnips, beans, cabbage. You season things with herbs, sage, thyme, maybe dill. Salt is precious. Pepper is a luxury. If someone offers you peppercorns, they might as well be handing you gold. You do have a sweet tooth, though sugar is exotic and expensive, so you settle for honey. You drizzle it on barley cakes, stir it into warm milk, chew on honeycomb like a prize. Honey's your candy. Bees, your tiny chefs. Desserts exist, just not how you'd imagine. Custards thickened with breadcrumbs. Apples roasted with spices. Frumenti, a weird cross between oatmeal and porridge served on holidays, sometimes with meat or dried fruit. Your table manners are casual. You eat with a knife, a spoon, and your fingers. No forks unless you're nobility and someone's trying to impress a duke. You mop up sauce with bread chew, noisily talk with your mouth full, nobody minds. Plates, maybe. But more often you eat from trenchers, stale bread rounds used as edible dishes. They soak up juices, then get eaten or fed to the poor. If you drop food on the ground, the 3-second rule is more like, is there visible dirt on it? Spoiler, you eat it anyway. And table etiquette. There's some. Don't blow your nose on the tablecloth. Don't throw bones under the bench unless you're a knight trying to look dramatic. Don't steal from your neighbor's trencher unless they're asleep. You eat twice a day. A mid-morning meal and then supper around sunset. Between maybe a snack of fruit or nuts. But if you're working, you forget to eat. Hunger becomes background noise, like bells or rain. Some days food is plenty. You smile over roasted onions and fresh cheese, laugh with friends, clink pottery cups filled with ale. Other days, a bowl of thin soup and some crusty bread feels like a gift from heaven. Historians still debate how balanced the peasant diet really was. You probably get more fiber and fewer refined carbs than your modern descendants. But malnutrition is always close. A poor harvest, a sick cow, a broken millstone, and everything collapses. You once heard of a town that made acorn bread during a famine. Ground them fine, boiled them thrice, then mixed with barley. It filled the belly. Barely. But you endure. Because food isn't just survival, it's ritual. It's the reason for gathering. The comfort after labor. The pause that makes life human. Tonight, your supper is simple boiled peas, a heel of bread, and a cup of lukewarm ale. You eat it slowly, watching the fire dance, listening to the creak of the rafters. You think about beer soup and laugh softly. Not bad for a day without beaver tail. The wind howls through the trees like a drunk minstrel practicing the bagpipes, and the thatch above your head creaks in complaint. It's late and you should be sleeping, but tonight's different. Because tomorrow, someone important is coming to town, and that means one thing: pageantry. You sit up in bed, heart a little quicker than usual. Not fear, just the flutter of excitement that only arrives when nobles, royal messengers, or actual knights are rumored to pass through. You stretch-pull on your least ragged tunic and mentally rehearse how not to trip while bowing. The Middle Ages love a good spectacle. Your village, sleepy and muddy most days, transforms when the upper crust arrives. Flags appear. Hay is swept from the street. Children are scrubbed and reminded not to throw pebbles. Even the dogs behave. Sort of. You remember the last time a noble visited. There were trumpets, actual brass trumpets, sounding like geese with ambition, and banners fluttering with family crests. You didn't understand, but admired anyway. The Lord's horse wore more embroidery than your entire family has owned in 3 generations. And the clothes, silk velvet fur-lined cloaks, even shoes with toes so long, they had to be tied to the knee with little golden chains. You couldn't decide if it was fashion or torture. You wake early the next day, brushing the dust from your sleeves, hair tied back with a scrap of ribbon. Everyone lines the village road, jostling for a better look. Some climb onto carts. One brave child climbs a tree. The priest looks mildly panicked. He hasn't had time to polish the altar candlesticks. Finally, they arrive. The noble, let's call him Lord Eberwine, is flanked by retainers, heralds, and at least one man in a helmet shaped like a bird. They don't walk. They glide. Even the horses seem prouder. The village bows. Someone throws petals, another throws a pie accidentally, and the entire moment feels like something out of a tapestry. But you notice things too. How the armor creaks when the knights dismount. How their boots are caked with mud just like yours. How the noblewoman's face tightens when she steps in something unpleasant. There's glamour here, but also discomfort, humanity, sweat. These events aren't just for show. They're opportunities. Lords reaffirm loyalty. Officials hear petitions. You might get a new road ordered or a tax forgiven, or if you're incredibly lucky, a small miracle approved. The herald reads a proclamation in a booming voice, reminding everyone who's in charge which lands belong to whom and how much wheat you now owe the granary. You cheer politely. After the formalities comes the real highlight, the feast. Now you're not at the high table, obviously, but you and the rest of the villagers are invited to witness the festivities and maybe sneak a chicken leg if you hover near the serving platters long enough. The hall or tent, if temporary, is ablaze with torchlight. Trestle tables groan under trenchers, meat pies, roasted swans with gilded beaks. You've never figured out how they get the gold to stick and enough bread to build a second village. There are entertainers, minstrels strumming lutes, jesters juggling eggs, even a dancing bear whose handler insists it's mostly friendly. You applaud enthusiastically when a man balances a sword on his nose. Someone whispers he once performed for a duke. You believe it. Toasts are made. Ale flows. Someone recites a poem in Latin. No one understands it, but everyone claps. And then the knights demonstrate their skill, swordplay, mock jousts, maybe even a tourney, if the town is large enough. You watch in awe as two armored men clash weapons, ringing sparks flying. It's brutal, beautiful, utterly captivating. You cheer with your whole chest. But courtly life isn't all feasts and fights. You've heard stories, scandals whispered at market, of knights with questionable honor, of tournaments ending in real bloodshed, of nobles who demand hospitality and then stay for weeks, draining the host's supplies and nerves. One neighbor still grumbles about that cousin of a duke who drank all the cider and left with my best goose. Still, chivalry is the ideal. Knights are supposed to uphold justice, protect the weak, and never say anything rude about a lady's hat. Reality varies, but the myth endures. You once heard a troubadour sing of a lady who dropped her glove into a lion's den to test her knight's devotion. He retrieved it. She married someone richer. Moral love is complicated. Historians still argue how widespread courtly love culture really was. Was it a social game for the elite? A poetic fantasy, a real set of behavioral codes? You don't care. You just like the songs. Later that evening, as the feast winds down, you linger by the embers of a great fire. A nobleman walks by and nods at you. Just a nod. But it makes your chest swell. You exist. You were seen. The next day, they're gone. Just like that. The banners are packed. The trumpets silent. The bird helmet man disappears into legend. And your village exhales. Life returns to normal. Mud chickens' chores. But the memory lingers. You saw real velvet. You tasted honey-drenched venison. You almost got kicked by a warhorse and lived to tell the tale. You smile, clutch the scrap of fabric someone dropped near the feast table and tuck it into your satchel like a secret. For just one day, you stood beside nobility. And for the rest of your life, you'll remember how it felt. You're up before the rooster today, stomach fluttering with nerves. Not fear exactly, more like anticipation. Because today you're not tilling fields or chasing pigs or dodging the reeve's eye. Today, you're going on a pilgrimage. It's not a vacation. It's not even particularly fun. But in the Middle Ages, a pilgrimage is one of the few reasons you might actually leave your village, and it's a very big deal. You've packed light, a staff, a water flask, a coin pouch with exactly 4 pennies, and a small wax-sealed badge from your local church, just in case anyone questions your motives. You're walking to the shrine of Saint Ethelburga the Steadfast, whose finger bone supposedly heals toothaches, broken hearts, and gout. Your aunt swears it cured her cow. Pilgrimages are holy errands. You go to atone to give thanks, or because your Lord suggested it strongly after that one misunderstanding with his daughter's missing scarf. Either way, you're walking hundreds of miles across dangerous roads for a chance to kneel before a relic and maybe return blessed. You wave goodbye to your neighbors who wish you well and give you snacks. Old Nan hands you a dried fish. You take it with grace and tuck it into your sack, already planning to trade it for something less pungent. Soon it's just you and the road. The countryside opens before you, hedgerows, misty fields, distant church spires. Birds chirp, frogs croak. Your feet already hurt. You join a group of other pilgrims not far from the crossroads. There's a brewer walking to Canterbury, a merchant headed to Santiago, and a shoemaker who claims he once met a leper who glowed. They sing songs, swap stories, and help pass the miles. Someone starts humming in Dulce Jubilo. You hum along even if you only know the chorus. Travel is slow. The roads are more like trails, muddy-rutted, occasionally occupied by oxen who don't care about your spiritual timetable. You ford rivers, sleep in barns, beg for meals, and once narrowly avoid a gang of roadside bandits by pretending to be very, very poor. Which frankly isn't hard. You carry a scallop shell on your cloak, a classic pilgrim badge. It tells everyone your purpose, and it might spare you from tolls or taxes. It might also invite scams. One clever fellow tries to sell you genuine saint's teeth, which turn out to be chicken bones. You don't buy them, but you're tempted. They're surprisingly white. You visit shrines along the way. Some are grand stone chapels with stained glass and processions. Others are just wooden boxes nailed to trees housing relics of dubious origin. You pray at all of them, just in case, and the relics. Every village boasts one. A thorn from the crown of thorns, a splinter from the true cross, the toe of Saint Bartholomew, the eyebrow of Saint Agnes, the shoelace of Saint Crispin. Do they work? Who knows? But belief is the point. At the major shrines, you see miracle boards, wooden plaques carved with testimonials. My son was cured of a fever. Our crops returned. My husband stopped drinking for an entire week. Small victories all attributed to the saint in residence. Historians still argue whether these miracles were fabrications or expressions of deep communal hope. But standing there, candle in hand, the air thick with incense and whispered prayers, you want to believe. Pilgrimage is physically grueling, but socially fascinating. You meet knights on penance, wealthy widows seeking redemption, jongleurs performing for coins. You even spot a former nun, now disguised as a man heading north with suspicious urgency. You nod respectfully and say nothing. Food is unpredictable. You live off bread, cheese, dried fruit, and the occasional turnip stew. Some monasteries offer hospitium, a traveler's welcome with broth ale and a straw mattress. You're so grateful you almost weep. At night, you stare at stars and wonder if Saint Ethelburga can really fix your ankle, your doubt, your fear of becoming like old Nan, yelling at goats and muttering Latin fragments in your sleep. At last, after weeks of walking, you arrive. The shrine is magnificent. Draped in silk, surrounded by candles, it radiates reverence. Pilgrims kneel, touch the altar, press tokens to the relic case. The atmosphere is hushed thick with awe and foot odor. You light a candle, drop a coin, kneel. You say everything you've been carrying, your guilt, your wishes, your gratitude. You don't expect fireworks, but you feel lighter, quieter inside, as though someone heard you even if they didn't speak back. And then you turn around, because the real miracle of pilgrimage, you have to go home. The return journey is quieter, reflective. You walk with less urgency, noticing more the way dew collects on spider webs, the lilt of wind through barley fields, the faint tolling of distant bells. You stop by a stream, wash your feet, and look at your face in the water. Tanned, tired, older maybe, but content. You tuck the wax-sealed badge from the shrine into your pouch and smile. You did it. You left. You walked. You witnessed. And now you return not as a different person, perhaps, but as a more whole one. You wake to the sound of coughing, deep, rattling wet. It's not yours, but it's close. A few feet away, your grandfather is wheezing under a heap of wool blankets, face flushed, eyes glassy. You swallow hard. In the Middle Ages, this isn't just a rough morning, it might be the beginning of the end. Because sickness is everywhere, always. And more often than not, it wins. You shuffle outside to fetch water carefully, slowly, because your joints are aching too. Not from illness necessarily, but from life. You're not even 30, but your back creaks, your hands are knotted, and you lost 2 teeth last winter. You're aging fast. Everyone is. In your world, life expectancy hovers somewhere in the 30s, but that doesn't mean people drop dead at 35. It's skewed by high infant mortality. If you survive childhood, you might live into your 50s, even 60s, but you'll carry every year in your bones. Children are everywhere laughing, working, fighting, but many of them don't make it. Fever pox, infected wounds. A simple cough can be a death sentence. Mothers pray constantly. Midwives whisper charms. Everyone hopes for a healthy babe with strong lungs and no visible omens. You remember the day your younger brother died. One day he was chasing ducks, the next he had a rash and couldn't breathe. You buried him in the churchyard and watched your mother age 5 years in a week. You never say his name out loud. Not anymore. Now you watch your grandfather and wonder if he'll pull through. He's seen 30 harvests, fought off wolves, swore at 2 different reeves. You hope he gets one more summer. You make him a poultice honey onion vinegar. You're not a physician, but nobody really is. Medieval medicine is a blend of observation, superstition, and tradition. It's based on the 4 humors: blood phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health depends on their balance. Illness A, sign the humors are out of sync. The solution: bleeding purging herbal tonics or leeches. Lots and lots of leeches. You've tried all of it. When your tooth ached, you chewed garlic. When your cousin fainted from heat, you rubbed her feet with pig fat and mustard. When the midwife said a prayer over your fever, you didn't question it. Doctors, real ones, exist. Mostly in cities, mostly trained in Latin. They read Aristotle, Galen, and Avicenna. They're expensive. You've never met one. Instead, you rely on the wise woman, the local midwife, and your own grandmother's knowledge of herbs. She swears by yarrow for wounds and elderflower for fevers. You trust her more than anyone. Still, things are improving. Some monasteries run infirmaries, quiet, clean by your standards and blessed by the church. Monks tend to the sick record symptoms, even try new remedies. You once heard of a monk who brewed willow bark tea to ease pain. Genius or witchcraft, depending who you ask. But more often, illness leads to death, and death is not a stranger. Funerals are fast. The body is washed, wrapped, and buried within a day. You process to the churchyard with candles, chant the De Profundis, and throw 3 handfuls of dirt onto the coffin. Sometimes there's bread and ale afterward. Sometimes just tears. Wills are simple: a blanket to one child, a goat to another, maybe forgiveness for a debt. If you're literate, you write it down. If not, you say it aloud with witnesses. And then there's the fear of the afterlife. Hell looms large. Purgatory is a real threat. People donate to the church, light candles, pay for masses to be said for their soul. Everyone wants a good death, confessed, blessed, and with time to prepare. But sometimes death doesn't wait. You've seen it strike in the night on the road in childbirth. Sudden, brutal, final. Historians still debate how medieval people processed mortality. Were they numb to it? Terrified, resigned? The truth is, you carry it with you like a second shadow. Not morbidly, just realistically. You laugh, love, eat, dance because life is fragile. Still, aging isn't just about dying, it's about changing. The strong farmer becomes the bent old man. The loud midwife becomes the soft-spoken herbalist. Children grow. Young lovers become parents. Time reshapes everything. You've seen elders held in reverence and also ignored. Some families cherish their old ones. Others see them as a burden. There's no retirement. You work until you can't. Then you tell stories by the fire and hope someone brings you stew. Today, your grandfather asks for his boots. I might go outside, he croaks. You help him sit up. His hands are like driftwood, gnarled, smooth, impossibly strong. You laugh softly and fetch the boots. He won't get far, but he needs to try. He makes it to the bench, sits, watches the chickens, and for that moment, just that he lives. You sit beside him sipping weak ale and watch the clouds drift. One more day, one more breath, one more story to carry forward. The bells ring louder than usual this morning. They're not calling you to mass or warning of fire. They're announcing something far more exciting, a festival. You blink against the sun and rub the sleep from your eyes. Already the village is transforming. Colorful cloth is draped between cottages. Barrels of ale are being rolled into the square. The baker is hauling out trays of fresh loaves that look suspiciously celebratory. There's music, laughter, and someone yelling about eels on a stick. Yes, it's that time again. Festivals in the Middle Ages are everything. Your daily life is not loud, messy, joyful, and just slightly dangerous. The calendar is bursting with feast days, religious holidays, saints' days, harvest festivals, solstice celebrations. You barely remember what half of them are for, but that doesn't matter. What matters is today you don't have to plow. The air smells different. Meat, herbs, spilled ale, sweat, and smoke. You breathe it in like a blessing. You can already feel your stomach growling. You're wearing your nicest tunic, patched but bright. Everyone's dressed up. Even your neighbor's goat is sporting a ribbon. Children dash between carts, shrieking faces sticky with honey. The town fool is juggling apples and yelling "bless you" every time he drops one. And then through the crowd, you see the mummers. Ah, yes, the traveling performers, half actors, half sorcerers, fully committed to dramatic chaos. They roll into town with masks, painted wagons, and drums that sound like thunder. Their plays are wild, allegorical affairs, good versus evil, saints versus devils, virtue versus flatulence. You don't always follow the plot, but you laugh anyway. One play features a knight arguing with a talking cow. You don't know who wins, but the cow gets more applause. After the show, you catch the scent of roasting meat, real meat, not just turnip stew pretending to be interesting. It's a whole hog glistening, spiced with something foreign and delicious. A crowd gathers bowls and hand eyes wide. Someone near you whispers it's seasoned with cinnamon. You're skeptical. That's something only royalty can afford. Still, you take a bite and swear it tastes like heaven or possibly sin. You sit near a bonfire with friends, tearing chunks of bread and passing a flask. A woman sings a ballad about a sailor and a mermaid and a goose that wouldn't die. You don't catch all the words, but the melody sticks in your chest like warmth. As the sun lowers, games begin. There's tug of war with a rope the size of a tree. A wrestling match between two millers who haven't spoken since someone's cart mysteriously lost a wheel last winter. And then the race. You hesitate. Your ankle still aches from chasing that runaway pig last week. But the crowd is chanting. Someone shoves you forward. Too late now. You sprint, laughing feet, pounding dirt, arms flailing. You don't win. You trip over someone's hat and faceplant into a cabbage cart. But the cheers, the laughter, the ridiculous cabbage crown someone places on your head after totally worth it. And now the real madness begins, the mystery play. Staged by local guilds, these are religious dramas, Bible stories acted out with wooden swords and dramatic gasps. Today, it's the story of Noah's Ark. There's a boat. There are animals, real and costumed. There is notably a very drunk man dressed as a sheep who keeps bleeding during the flood scene. The devil's role is always a hit. Kids boo him, throw breadcrumbs. He hisses and cartwheels across the stage. Some say these performances are as much morality lessons as they are comedy routines. You say they're both. Historians still argue whether these plays were devout political or just creative escapism. But when the whole town's gathered, mouths open, hearts light, you don't question it. You just feel it. As dusk deepens, torches are lit. The dancing starts. A fiddler tunes his strings. Someone beats a drum. The music's simple, wild, and fast. You join the circle, spinning, clapping, losing track of time. Your hands sting, your feet ache, but your soul hums. Someone hands you a meat pie. You don't ask what's in it. Children collapse under benches. Elders sip wine, eyes half closed. The stars come out soft and familiar. Somewhere two boys argue over who gets to wear the saint's costume next year. And through it all, you remember. This isn't just fun. It's needed. In a world ruled by hunger, toil, and plague, festivals are reprieve. A crack of light in a heavy sky. A pause between the labors. A chance to laugh at devils, kiss someone under a tree, and eat honey straight from the comb. You lean back, eyes on the fire belly, full heart lighter. Tomorrow, you'll go back to fields and chores and cold mornings. But tonight, you're part of something timeless. By morning, the village is quiet again. Just the clink of buckets at the well, a child hiccuping from too much honey cake, and one confused sheep still wearing part of a mummer's costume. But you're not dwelling on the festival anymore. Today your mind is on something more, flesh and bone. Because today you're getting a haircut. No, not at a salon. Not with soothing music and warm towels. You're heading to the barber surgeon, a man whose toolkit includes scissors, razors, leeches, and saws. You pray he picks the right one. You duck into his stall near the market square. He's sharpening something on a stone that could slice air. You glance at the stained apron. You try not to make eye contact with the tray of tools. And then he smiles. A gap-toothed, grease-slicked grin. You relax. Slightly. In the Middle Ages, barbers do far more than cut hair. They're your doctors, dentists, and minor miracle workers. They lance boils, pull teeth, stitch wounds, and occasionally amputate limbs. Some are trained apprentices. Some learned from their fathers. Some just sort of figured it out. The red and white barber pole. That's not decoration. It represents blood and bandages. Yes, you're about to sit in front of a guy who proudly advertises blood as part of the experience. You mention your aching back. He offers a cupping. You ask about your stomach. He suggests a purge followed by ale and a hearty nap. You settle for a shave and a bit of gossip. The shave is terrifying. He holds the razor like he's sculpting a saint. Every scrape feels like it might go too far. But he's quick, efficient, and surprisingly gentle. When he's done, your face feels new, breezy even, and slightly vulnerable. You thank him. He offers a tooth pull special. You decline. Later that week, your cousin sprains her ankle. No fancy bandages, no elevation. Just a poultice of clay herbs and sheep's wool, plus a chant whispered 3 times at dawn. Somehow, it helps. You're not surprised. Medicine here is a strange cocktail of folk tradition, half-remembered Latin, and deep trust in divine intervention. If you feel ill, you might see the wise woman who grinds up dried toads and chamomile, or the priest who offers holy water and a firm pat on the head, or a traveling peddler selling cure-all powder that smells suspiciously like dried dung. Every remedy has its believers. One woman swears by crushed snails for skin infections. A monk prescribes wine boiled with rose petals and ginger for headaches. You once ate charcoal after getting stung by a bee. It did nothing, but now you can say you've eaten charcoal, which feels important. Then there's astrology. Yes, truly. Many people believe the stars influence health. Certain procedures like bloodletting are timed to lunar phases. You don't fully understand it, but you do know that when someone says Mars is angry, you clutch your ribs. And then there are lepers. Feared, pitied, shunned. Lepers are said to be contagious, cursed by God, some say. They're often forced to wear special cloaks, carry bells to signal their approach, and live outside town in leper colonies. But not all leprosy is the same. Some cases are misdiagnosed eczema, others more serious. You remember a man who used to live 2 villages over, kind, quiet. One day he came to market with a rash. A week later, the bishop declared him unclean. He disappeared. You never saw him again. Disease shapes everything. The plague, when it comes, changes your world. Swift, brutal, incomprehensible. People die within days. Black swellings, fever, delirium. Whole families vanish. Entire villages go silent. You don't talk about it much even now. It's like a bruise the size of Europe. But it lingers. You've heard travelers say it came from the east. Others say it's punishment from God. The truth you don't know. You just bury your neighbors and pray it doesn't return. Historians still argue about the exact causes of the Black Death: bacteria, fleas, rats, trade routes. But to you it was a monster. Unseen. Merciless. Real. And yet even after it, life continues. You grow herbs. Mint for nausea. Valerian for sleep. Yarrow for wounds. You watch how animals behave. Do they eat this plant? Avoid that one. You listen to the old midwife when she says, don't sleep with your head to the north. You obey the priest when he says, pray harder, fast longer, and sometimes, miraculously, you heal. Your cousin's ankle gets better. The fever passes. The cough fades. You learn to live alongside risk, to accept that every scratch might fester, every winter might be your last. But you still plant onions. You still kiss cheeks. You still dance when the piper plays. Because even in a world without penicillin or sterile gloves, the human body is resilient. It bends, breaks, recovers. And when it doesn't, you bury the dead, say their names, and keep walking. Because the barber's stall is still open. Because someone needs a poultice. Because someone somewhere is asking, have you tried powdered nettle? I hear it's amazing. Rain drums softly on the cottage roof, a steady rhythm that almost lulls you back to sleep. But the bells are ringing again, and this time it's not for a feast or a fire or even a funeral. It's for justice. Well, medieval justice. Which, as you're about to find out, is less about fairness and more about public theater, strange rituals, and a pinch of chaos. You throw on your cloak and hurry toward the village square, where a crowd is already forming. The reeve stands at the front, looking important. Beside him, a man you vaguely know is slumped on a stool, hands bound, face pale. Someone whispers he was caught stealing onions from the priest's garden. You wince. Not because he's guilty, just because you know how these things go. Justice here depends on class, luck, and spectacle. A noble might get a fine and a strongly worded letter. A peasant, he gets a trial by public humiliation, or worse. You've seen it all: stocks, pillories, floggings. One time a man was tied to a cart and paraded through the streets while children pelted him with stale turnips. You threw one yourself. You missed. You were 6. Today's case starts with an oath swearing. The accused places his hand on a holy relic, a saint's bone, a bit of scripture, maybe the local bishop's hat, and swears he's innocent. If he can get 12 neighbors to vouch for his character, he might walk free. That's called compurgation. Of course, if your neighbors hate you, well, tough luck. He can also request a trial by ordeal. That's when things get theatrical. There's ordeal by hot iron. Hold a red-hot bar, walk 3 paces, wrap your hand, and wait 3 days. If it heals clean, you're innocent. If it festers, you're guilty. Or ordeal by cold water tied up and thrown in a river. Sink, you're innocent. Float, guilty. Because floating means you've been rejected by the pure water, obviously. Science. You once saw someone try the hot iron. His hand never healed right, but he was declared innocent. Technically. Today, the onion thief avoids ordeal. Barely. He's sentenced to a week in the stocks and must repay the priest with double onions. His wife bursts into tears. His son throws a pebble at the reeve. You look away. Justice isn't about truth. It's about order. Keeping the peace. Making sure everyone knows their place. But it's not always cruel. Sometimes villagers settle disputes themselves, manorial courts held under the Lord's eye rule on everything from broken fences to insults involving goats. You've sat in once or twice. Long-winded affairs. A lot of muttering. Some decent bread, though. There's also church courts which handle sins, adultery, blasphemy, heresy. Their punishments are lighter confession penance, maybe a public apology. But if you cross the line too far, even the church hands you over to secular courts. And then there's trial by combat. Rare, but thrilling. Two people, sometimes nobles, sometimes commoners, duke it out with swords, clubs, or fists. God is supposed to favor the innocent. In reality, God seems to favor whoever has more upper body strength. You once heard about a widow who challenged a man claiming her late husband's land. She fought him with a rock and a sock and won. Historians still argue if that actually happened, or if it's just a tavern tale. You hope it's true. Law varies wildly. In one town, stealing bread gets you a flogging. In another, it gets you a job baking. In one village, a man was fined for singing lewd songs during a procession. In yours, that's called Tuesday. Still, certain crimes are universal murder, arson, poaching. Especially poaching. Killing the Lord's deer, that's practically treason, even if your family is starving, even if you only took one. You know a boy who vanished after setting a snare in the forest. No one talks about it. Punishments are often public. Shame is a weapon. You've seen people shaved bald, forced to walk in rags, paraded through town, with signs reading liar or thief. It's harsh, but it works. Sometimes. But laws aren't all gloom. There are funny ones too. In a nearby village, a man was fined for letting his pig drink from the church font. Another was banned from singing too loudly after sundown. You suspect the priest just didn't like his voice. And then there's village gossip, which enforces its own kind of justice. Say the wrong thing about someone's chickens, and suddenly you're eating dinner alone for a month. No trial, no stocks. Just cold shoulders and extra salty stew. Justice may be arbitrary, flawed, and occasionally ridiculous, but it's also necessary. Without it, the fields don't get tilled. The feasts don't happen. People don't sleep easy. You've seen what happens when fear takes over. It's not pretty. Today, the thief is released from the stocks as the sun sets. His son brings him a piece of bread. They sit quietly under a tree. The priest walks by and nods once, stiff but civil. You walk home in the twilight, head full of questions. What is justice really? Is it fairness, balance? The sound of a crowd going silent when the verdict drops, you don't have answers. You just know that tomorrow someone else will break a rule. Someone else will face the square. And you'll be there again, watching. Because justice in your world is part of the rhythm. Your boots crunch softly on the frost-covered ground as you walk toward the edge of the village past the chapel beyond the last grazing fence. The air is still breath-turning to mist with each exhale. Crows stir in the trees above you, but otherwise it's quiet. You're headed to the cemetery, Not for a burial, not today, but just to visit, to remember, to think. Because in your world, death isn't the opposite of life. It's woven into it, and where the living sleep on straw mats and worry about turnips, the dead rest in holy ground, under carefully blessed soil. The graveyard is simple. No elaborate tombstones, no sculpted angels, just wooden markers worn smooth by rain. Maybe a small carving crosses saints, a faded date scratched by a grieving hand. Some graves have offerings, a sprig of rosemary, a candle stub, a pebble polished smooth. You kneel near your brother's. He died young, a fever, a bad season. You don't come often, but today feels right. You whisper a prayer, not a loud one, just enough for the wind to carry. In the Middle Ages, the afterlife is not abstract. It's very real, tangible, detailed. You grow up with images of heaven, a golden city, a garden of delights, music that never ends, and hellfire, demons, eternal regret. You've heard sermons so vivid you couldn't sleep for 2 nights. But the real focus for most is purgatory, that in-between space where souls burn off sin like steam from boiling water. Painful, yes, but temporary, manageable. You can help loved ones through it by saying masses, lighting candles, giving alms in their name. You've done all 3 for your brother, twice for good measure. The church teaches that dying well matters. A good death means confession last, writes a clean soul. You've seen the priest hurry through fields in a storm to reach a dying man's bed, because a soul unshriven might wander, and nobody wants ghosts. Yes, ghosts. You've heard the stories. The weeping woman in the cloister, the moaning boy near the well, the knight who rides at dusk. Most people shrug, then sleep with garlic tucked under their pillows, just in case. You rise, brushing your knees. It's time to go. Back in the village, people are stirring. Bread is baking, chickens are shrieking. The world, as always, moves on. You pause at the well to refill your flask. The water's cold, clear, and miraculously safe this time of year. You sip slowly, watching your reflection ripple. You look older than you feel, or maybe just realer. A child runs by laughing. A goat follows. Someone yells for help with the hay. You smile. Duty calls. You join the others in the field, shoulders brushing, sleeves rolled. You work. You laugh. You complain about the Reeves' new boots, why so fancy? And as you lift your scythe to harvest the last row, a tune hums in your head. A song from the last feast. Life here is hard, brief, often unfair, but it's also full. There's music, rain, butter on fresh bread, warm hands in cold mornings, jokes whispered at the wrong moment. The way candlelight flickers on a stone wall like it's dancing just for you. Historians still argue whether peasants in the Middle Ages were miserable or simply realistic. You think it's both. You hurt, but you also hope. You suffer, but you also dream. And every night before you close your eyes, you whisper the same words. Keep me safe, Lord. Keep the fire burning. Keep the roof strong. And maybe, let me wake to another dawn. And most days you do. The fields fade now, the sky softening into twilight hues. Your hands, calloused from work, rest quietly in your lap. The village hums, slows, bells, quiet fires, dim footsteps hush beneath the straw and soil. Thatched roofs blur into the landscape, candlelight flickering gently behind latticed windows. Somewhere a lullaby echoes from a distant cottage. A child giggles, then sighs into sleep. Even the animals seem to settle, hooves, still wings, folded paws curled under. You walk the path back home slowly, your breath warm in the cooling night air. Your world full of labor and laughter loss and feasting prayers and punishment breathes with you. The past may be rough-edged, but it holds a kind of beauty that settles deep in your bones. You close your door, place your boots by the fire, lay down on straw stuffed with lavender and dry hay. Your body aches, but your heart doesn't. The stories of the day of saints and ghosts of bread and judgment of dancing and burial begin to float away like ash into a calm breeze. You're safe now. The fire's low but steady. The dark outside is kind, not cruel. And somewhere far above your thatched ceiling, the stars wheel slowly across the night, ancient and constant. So breathe, friend. Let go of the mud, the toil, the bitter ale, the cracked bowl, the endless hunger for justice and warmth and understanding. For now, just rest. You've walked through centuries tonight. You've seen the strangeness, the sorrow, the silly joy, and you made it. Now sleep easy, dream deep, and drift gently through the quiet of the ages. End of script. Sweet dreams.